In the capital, a huge crowd gathered for some royal spectacle. But it turned out everyone came only for the first prince of the kingdom of Arkin Noko. And this official, with a face that makes you want to hit it more than anything I've ever seen, solemnly announces that his punishment has already been decided. Our guy Nokul is kneeling. He was sentenced to be expelled from the entire kingdom. They call it garbage disposal, but in reality, it's a small annoying detail slapped right in the face, guys. For now, the girl in pirate attire sits on the raft, watching carefully from there, and next to her a pet turtle. Nokul tries to protest, but her hands are tightly tied behind her back. She completely loses control, screams that a terrible mistake has happened and that it's all due to an unfortunate misunderstanding. And the guard's boot immediately shuts her up. Apparently, no proper legal procedure is provided here for losers. This flattering official leans closer and calls him Former Highness with a look of superiority on his face. This minister Shred orders him to shut up with a single look, one that screams, "I set you up." Shred then breaks everything down point by point and insists that Nokul is guilty of the two most important crimes and in the first attack, he even disdainfully lightly pokes our guy in the forehead. This crime, he declares, is simply the possession of his unique skill. It seems these skills are special powers granted by the heavens to only a chosen few. Everyone perceives Nokul's skill as creepy. It gives you goosebumps. His power is called Recycle. It works only with literal trash and broken junk. Shred calls it a forbidden art that pollutes Kingdom Woe W, but does so delicately as not to touch anyone. Our guy understands this himself. He admits that his power is the reason why he is so despised. So it's no wonder that he always tried to stay away from even having to take the devil's device in his hands. Nokul stubbornly insists that his research was for the future of the kingdom. He saw how pollution was growing from the trash, threatening their very way of life. That's why he tried to find a way to effectively use the overflowing junk. For a moment, it seems as if the crowd is really listening, maybe even believing him. And the man with the appearance of a true monarch standing on the balcony above simply commands everyone to be silent. He tells Shred not to allow the sophistry of Nicola to shake the people. This must not be allowed. Shred immediately bows before this majesty, Geostra too happy to return to the scenario. This Geostra, who looks as if he can barely tolerate this whole scam, is. It turns out he is the second prince, and he declares everything his brother said is pure lies. He says he saw the entire incident from the side with his own eyes. They say that in this incident, Nokul used his forbidden technique to try to kill a girl named Rose. Our guy is completely confused. He tries to grab a word to somehow defend himself. And Shred just plays out the scene, officially announces two major crimes, shows a terrifying skill, and attempts murder. The second charge instantly turns the crowd. Now everyone is shouting and demanding his head. Geostra, not hiding a self-satisfied expression, declares that this is proof. The skill Recycle is a curse, so immediate punishment is inevitable. Before Noel can digest the betrayal, the guards are already grabbing his hands. He twitches and bursts into a scream, insisting that this is a misunderstanding, that he is innocent. But his pleas are cut off by a stone to the head thrown from the enraged crowd. This mafia drives everyone crazy. They shout for the great center to get out of the kingdom. And our guy just looks broken, accepting fate as a chance to expel him, and that echoes everywhere. The guards march Nokul through the mocking crowd. This is how his official exile begins. The road stretches along the coast, long, lonely, all the way to a remote fortress by the sea. The final stop is a tiny raft made of logs, floating in the sea, literally filled with garbage real beauties. Giestra, always the supportive brother, steps forward to deliver one last condescending farewell. He insists that this whole spectacle is an act of mercy, considering Nokul's former royal status. At farewell, he hands over to his brother the ownership rights to all this sea of garbage. Let him rule it. Even the guard laughs, mocking him for the new kingdom of garbage. Shred sucks up to Giestra and with a tone full of feigned sympathy declares that this is exactly a wonderful performance for the soldiers. With a truly intrusive smile that makes you want to hit immediately, Giestra simply absorbs everything and savors every moment of his victory. Nokul is left to drift alone in the mud in a real skull box among floating debris. From the shore, two villains smugly lay out their evil plan. Supposedly, he won't last long there anyway. This tiny raft is pushed further and further into the sea, and it carries our boy away from everything he once knew. Knocked down and broken, Nokul desperately tries to understand how everything could have gone so wrong so quickly. His thoughts suddenly return to the incident. He remembers that he was just trying to use his skill for something useful then. We see him in his old territory at the huge fifth waste disposal polygon of the kingdom. He was working on a project carefully assembling broken materials with extreme concentration. He solemnly lifts the finished work, a helmet crafted from all the recycled junk. He clicks it onto his head to check and doesn't even suspect that someone is watching him. Suddenly, someone's voice calls out, "Your Highness." He turns around in surprise and sees a young girl already approaching. This is Rose, the Prime Minister's daughter, the very girl whose murder he was just accused of. Rose says she knew he would be here already, so self-satisfied. Nokul is still at it, wearing his homemade helmet, and he is already all confused why Rose ended up right at the dump. She immediately flares up, "What do you mean? Why am I here?" It turned out he missed an important class, so she had to look for him herself. His dedication is genuine. She sneaks a glance at his device and asks if he is again crafting one of his quirky gadgets. No faith at all in our guy. He proudly declares that his helmet has a built-in magical transmitter, and now, he says, he will finally show off his brilliant invention. With it, he can send commands to a levitation device attached to a battered old broom. Click, and the broom swiftly flies up because the magical gadget stuck on top decides everything. Then it starts spinning like a Roomba possessed by a spirit, sweeping away lighter trash while he watches in delight. But he honestly admits this magic has limits. He cannot lift anything heavier than a barrel. Rose covers her mouth and tries with all her might not to laugh at his pathetic little invention. As soon as she passes by, he calls her and immediately leads her to the biggest pile of junk. Rose raises her hand, shows an exquisite ring, and begins to hum some incantation. Suddenly, a fierce gust of wind whirls around her. It gains strength and presses from all sides. And she releases the spell Divine Squall, much more impressive than a flying broom. Nokul is completely stunned. She immediately understands that high-level wind magic was involved here. Her spell effortlessly lifts all the heavy junk piled up by the crowds and in seconds sweeps it away from the space in front of her. With a self-satisfied look, she declares that she can tidy up without using any trash. She essentially tells him real magic is much more effective. Thanks for participating, but no. And Nokul can only freeze in amazement and admit, the Prime Minister's daughter is simply assembled completely differently. Rose waved her hand, "These are child's play. If you want, I can even teach you." But Cavell can only scratch his head and honestly agree, yes, magic is indeed more convenient. But then he turns around, holding his DIY helmet, and cuts in that this is not what he is aiming for at all. This completely throws Rose off track. She just stares at him as if he had grown a second head. She demands an answer that the prince, strange as it may be, can actually seek, and that something is more important than magic. His consciousness rushes back to all the nobles who mocked him, calling his skill useless and dirty. And Rose does not back down. She interrogates what could be more important than royal dignity and invincible power. The face of Nokul becomes completely serious. He is about to reveal a true great truth. He admits he had never before had the chance to explain himself to anyone in a human way. Returning to her, he finally dares to lay out his grand, nurtured by trash vision. He says that the endless wars of the kingdom forced the country to massively produce thousands of units of magical weapons. And everyone relentlessly chased the next big leap, a stronger sword, better armor. And as soon as that gear aged or broke, it was simply thrown away without ceremony. Which ultimately gave rise to these gigantic, ever-growing mountains of magical junk that which accumulates without end. It does not decompose and actively poisons the earth, killing animals. He remembered how he tried to warn the royal court. The ministers cared only about instant profit, not about the future. So he came to the landfill alone, determined to find a way out that others would not be able to find. Looking at his own reflection, he says that even things completely discarded are capable of finding new purpose and potential. With all his determination, he swears to protect the land his mother loved, even if the entire royal world hates him for it. His great damn heroic speech immediately confuses Rose. She blushes, mixes up words, and completely loses herself from excitement. Rose instantly tries to backtrack and declares that he is by no means cool to her, and in general, she says, there is nothing here, this is not about that. Nokul squeezes the helmet in his hands and simply asks if she said something. Romance is clearly not his element. But in a moment his face changes, from confusion to complete horror. He shouts at Rose to jump back, but she still stands in place confused because her powerful wind spell has just caused a real avalanche of trash right behind her. She finally turns around and lets out a perfectly measured scream of horror. Nokul realized her showy magic shook the whole pile of Buramnestia. He rushes to her in a desperate dash and knows there is no way to make it in time. Even his tiny flying broom is completely swept away by the wave of debris from. There are no other options. He decides to use his forbidden skill and try to control the trash itself. He still tears forward, trying at least to protect her from the worst. This boy even throws a broken shield, as if that would stop a real mountain of garbage. Waving his hand, he activates Recycle and throws all his attention into the collapsing pile. His eyes widen as the power hits. He is not even sure what exactly is about to happen. Suddenly, the junk fragments hang in the air and begin to swap places, forming something colossal. A giant homemade creation of pure scrap tears itself from the dumpster because, of course, that's how it should be. From the trash rises a fully formed homunculus made of junk, and both freeze without a word. This huge monster made of barrels and broken armor looms over the frightened knuckle. Its giant hand sharply descends, not to attack, it simply covers them from the remaining debris. Rosie can only watch as the golem takes the full hit of avalanche, saving them both. The dust finally settles and it becomes visible. The trash golem took the entire blow, and despite the chaos around them, a safe zone grows. Nokul completely exhausts himself, barely standing after that crazy stunt. He looks at his creation and it is already crumbling back into a pile, and he wholeheartedly rejoices that he managed to stop that collapse. Then he jerks suddenly and turns sharply, suddenly remembering why he did it in the first place. He rushes to Rose, who lies unconscious on the ground, and in panic calls her name as if everything depends on it. When he reaches out to her, she begins to move and moans softly, "Thank God." A wave of pure relief washes over his face. He suddenly realizes that she is really alive. Suddenly, he hears a voice calling from outside, curious who else could be here. And of course, his brother Giestra arrives with a couple of guards, just in time, the most perfect timing imaginable. The gaze of the second prince immediately fixed firmly on the unconscious Rose lying in the ruins. Then he notices a huge pile of scrap, the very one that was once a golem. It looks threatening, though blurry. Giestra's face twists with pure rage as he shouts what exactly happened, demanding to finally be explained what the hell is going on here. Nokul just looks down at him, remaining kneeling beside Rose, about to start explaining this whole mess. The memory breaks off. Nokul sharply returns to reality and remembers he was only trying to save the kingdom's future. The arrogant faces of his brother in torn shreds flash before his eyes. He realizes they never believed him for a moment. One thing spins in his head: how he couldn't protect a single girl, at least not the way everyone else sees it. His face contorts. The mask of usual cruel, utterly merciless rage remains in place, born of betrayal. He twitches helplessly. He is almost going mad with the thought that he wishes he had the power to change at least something. This boy screams wildly in his head. If only he were stronger, this would not have happened. But just as he clenches his fists, the luxurious rose ring slips from his grip and falls right in front of him. Nokul's eyes widen sharply. He freezes in disbelief, his gaze fixed on the ring that just fell from his hands. He shifts his gaze to his own palms, completely stunned. Could it be that his power worked on its own? The ring hangs in the air, and a strange, fibrous material begins to emerge from it. In his hand is a bundle of raw hemp fiber. The skill miraculously decomposed the object into its simplest components. He picks up the ring, examines it carefully, and then aloud admits his own power remains a complete mystery to him. His thoughts whirl back to childhood when his mother warned, "Never use your power because people will be afraid." Somewhere nearby, in the middle of nowhere, he suddenly realizes there is no one left to judge him. Deciding that it is better to die than to slowly wither away, he directs all his willpower to the magic of the ring. With a new sense of purpose, he finally decides to test what his recyclability is really capable of. Rising on the water, he swims past a dimly broken wooden box, and it suddenly provides the perfect target for his first real experiment. He channels power through the ring and aims at a fragment that bumps against the wave and sways right in the water. Clenching his intent into a fist, he decides this time to test whether he can consciously decompose the object into components. For a moment, the old spirit of the inventor flares up inside him, and a genuine smile appears on his face as he prepares to make the attempt. He sharply thrust his hand forward and shouted the name of his ability, piercingly recycling, this time with full control. The broken box instantly crumbled, then reassembled now into a neat stack of flawless wooden planks. Our guy holds the result and freezes in shock. He just transformed worthless junk into quality material. Inside him, thoughts rushed forward and began wildly darting around how to use this when a critical memory clicked into place. He remembers the avalanche, subconsciously gathering scrap into a giant golem to save Rose. The penny drops. His skill is not only deconstruction. He can rebuild, assemble, and create something from scratch. When he looks at the endless sea of garbage, despair burns out in him and turns into determination. This is not a prison, this is a workshop. He is sure he needs ore to pave the way through this endless sea of garbage. So he touches the freshly made wood. The magic ring is already glowing. In his mind, he draws the exact shape he must obtain and reduces all intentions to a drawing width. With another shout of recycle, he unleashes his power on the stack of lumber. Ore perfectly formed, and right here on his homemade raft suddenly appears out of nowhere. Our guy lifts it high, it shines. From now on he is officially a magical master. He is puzzled by the quality. He admits that he has no idea how to assemble such a thing by himself at all. He realizes his skill does not require any drawings. It is practically a divine cheat code. The gears spin wildly and he already clearly sees. Probably he can craft almost anything just by imagining it. For a moment he freezes, pondering, what if his brother Geostras simply allows him to build a new life here? But that thought flashes and immediately fades. He brushes it off, deciding he will think about it another time. In memory, the brother's farewell phrase cuts sharply, brazenly, as if he truly inherited the right to own this trash sea. A moment of pure defiance flickers on Knuckles' face as he comprehends the last insult. Standing on his own raft, he clearly understands. If this is his possession, then he can do whatever he wants. He tightly clenches the ring, accepting the challenge without hesitation. All right, Geostra, you're in the game. Casting a vigilant gaze over his new kingdom, assembled from junk, he makes a vow to build something truly grand. His ultimate goal is already carved in stone. He will build his own city that soars, and at that very moment, grand, capable of changing the world, a wave of dizziness overwhelms him, and everything ends. When Knuckles' eyes suddenly open wide, he is completely confused and, staggering with a hangover, sleepily mumbles, "Where am I?" He feels the rope still cutting from the inside and suddenly comes to the thought the whole escape plan was only in his head. Knuckles is still tied to the raft and slowly digests himself with words, so it turns out he really is still breathing. Only then does the terrible truth hit him. That epic escape plan turned out to be a feverish delusion. And in reality, he simply collapsed on his raft, trying not to think about the fact that he was banished for life. It turns out he got so caught up in training his recycle skill that he astonishingly completely lost track of everything else. The trembling of his former self returns, the same incredible concentration that overwhelms him when he is about to start building something. And this explains why he completely missed the giant storm that is already rolling in and will definitely kill him. It thundered right above his head. He thinks quickly and skillfully, restores the rope from nothing, literally from thin air, moment by moment. He is immediately thrown into a fight for his own life against the raging sea. Because he tied himself to the raft, it was the only sensible move that prevented him from becoming fish prey. When the storm finally subsides, he begins to untie himself and is already planning how to use the rope again. But then he realizes the storm literally swept away everything he managed to build. Everything disappeared. Everywhere tears of disappointment, and on his face remains only pure, unwavering determination. Drifting aimlessly, he suddenly notices a small island on the horizon, a beacon of hope. Knuckles paddles madly towards it and rejoices as if he will finally reach the shore. With relief, he exhales and steps onto solid ground. Officially, he is already an immortal castaway. His relief is cut short by a strange dome-shaped structure standing right in the middle of the island. A quick survey shows this is not an island, but rather a sandbar that goes underwater during high tide. Yet his curiosity is firmly fixed on that strange dome wrapped in vines. As soon as you get very close, he cannot understand. Is it a strange rock formation or maybe a giant shell? As soon as the thought occurs to him that there might be useful materials inside, he immediately gets to work trying to open it. In the last sudden jerk, the dome's doors explode open and burst outward, scattering dust and vines everywhere. The dust of antiquity rushes out in a thick cloud and knocks Knuckles off his feet. He is overcome by a severe coughing fit. In a haze, he notices something moving and instantly thinks, "Oh, wonderful, a monster." Yes. In the darkness inside the strange structure, something slowly, almost shyly, begins to peek out. And it is a tiny yawning turtle, the scariest creature one can imagine. This little one explains that he was kept locked in the shell for too long. Noko learns that the turtle, as it turned out, has been alive for over 10,000 years, simply unreal. Our guy seems to freeze with excitement until the end. He even chokes up while telling what an incredible experience it is. And then the turtle asks who is speaking and Noko freezes. Did he really just hear that? He just looks silently without a single word, slowly digesting what the turtle just said. Panic immediately sets in. He suddenly realizes that he has completely lost his mind. After that, pausing to recover, he politely introduces himself to the talking reptile. The turtle also introduces herself Aspidoklin and looks overly pleased with herself. Nokul immediately throws out nicknames and they shake hands on it because, of course, that's how it should be. Aspie notes arriving on a raft is, to put it mildly, quite reckless, but Nokul just puffs out his chest and declares that it's no big deal after all. He has a recycle skill. This turtle has no idea what that is, so Nokul decides a show is needed. He heads to the shore for materials and mentions that he is also starving to death. Thanks to his skill, he breaks apart a piece of driftwood and finds several rusty nails inside. Aspie just stands motionless and stares in shock while Nokul begins stacking a whole pile of real trash. Nokul tells his new little turtle to watch carefully and raises the ring with a confident, self-satisfied smile. He sharply thrusts his hand forward, releasing his power in a dramatic cry of recycle. The little turtle Aspie, the judge, hits the sand completely stunned by the sudden light show. These raw materials on the shore instantly take on a completely new form. Boom Nokul firmly holds the perfect fishing rod and reveals his skill trash to treasure. He immediately casts the line and Aspie admits, this is indeed a rather convenient power. This ancient turtle seems deeply thoughtful, stroking his non-existent beard. Then Aspie suggests making a second pole trap since two people can catch much more fish. Nocol awkwardly looks away and notes that the turtle absolutely cannot hold a fishing rod. His brain locks up completely as soon as he realizes something is terribly, very wrong. Because Aspie is already glowing, he simply tells him, wait a second. A massive flash of light pushes Nocol and he flies back onto the sand. And when the dust settles, the girl with the shell on her head asks if this form is more useful. Our boy's brain completely shorts out. As soon as he sees Turtle Girl, his jaw drops by itself. Aspie immediately reaches for the fishing rod but first suggests reworking a few things for quite obvious reasons. The embarrassed Nook throws a rag over the corner, orders her to hide because she will get sick and, without finishing his sentence, puts on a dress and casually says, by the way, he is a boy. Nishli barely squints, says everything looks normal, and hands over the second pole, deciding not to ask questions about it. As soon as the equipment was in place, the second line splashed and released them into the calm ocean waters. And now they are just relaxing together, fishing, and even Aspie admits this quiet life current is not so bad after all. Knuckles just have to find out how a turtle can suddenly grow a human body. They ask what her Aspie joint is. Aspie begins to tell her whole life story and, as it turns out, it stretches very, very far. We return to memories. Once this tiny sandy spit was a giant living island with a volcano. It turns out the locals worshipped him as the god of the great land for him. That was pretty good. Knuckles' brain twitches and wheezes at the word God part, and Aspie immediately tenses up and demands respect. But he admits the golden age of worship did not last forever. When his followers lost faith and scattered from the island, his divine power began to seriously weaken. Without his magic holding the island above the water, it would have simply sunk beneath the waves. Now he feels completely unnecessary in the modern world and calls himself nothing other than garbage. The word garbage really hurts his ears and he, unable to hold back, clenches his fist with all his might out of anger, and Nokul sends him a huge thumbs up, calling his story simply incredible to Aspie's shock. Our guy lays everything out clearly. Garbage is just another name for a bundle of possibilities. Ask for. Aspie is actually very deeply impressed by this ridiculously optimistic view of being already written off, with which, after that, Nokul finally decides it's time to tell his own pitiful story. He counts it from that very grand Waldorf kingdom, which he once called home. Inside on the plate lies a fish skeleton, a silent sign of royal luxury left behind. And here is his brother Giustra, who is already being explained how productive meetings can be without Nokul. A memory shows how Nokul, without holding back for a moment, bursts into the council meeting with his trash inventions to prevent people from drowning in pollution. Giustra smiled predatory and declared, if Nokul loves trash so much, let him go and die in it. Then the advisor questions the wisdom of literally handing over the rights to the entire trash sea into someone's hands. Geostrow waved off the advisor's concern and smugly said there was no need to worry here. In his guilt, he recalls, throughout the history of the kingdom, no one has ever survived in that trashy sea abyss. It seems he imagines how Nokul is now starving and wildly bored, missing the castle's exquisite dishes. But in reality, our guy is simply casually skewering freshly caught fish for dinner. And he takes a huge, crunchy bite, and from the look of it, not a drop resembles someone who is unwell. He and Aspie are catching pure pleasure, devouring simple but incredibly tasty food. They even caught a whole bucketful. Local fish seem to have zero survival instinct. While another fish is frying, Aspie throws out a phrase about how incredibly useful this processing skill is. Nicola is affected by this. He needs a better way to start a fire, so he targets one of the fishing rods. With a flash, it instantly turns into a perfect bow drill, ready to produce sparks. The magic works instantly, but the real physical work makes him sweat profusely so much that Aspie almost dies laughing. Completely exhausted, he fiercely stares at the ring. If he could, he would make himself a simpler tool. Then he remembers how he tried to assemble a complex distiller, and it just fell apart into a senseless pile of scrap. Aspie points out, as long as the fire looks good, they don't care. It will take much more to really be able to live here. It seems to give her an idea. She clenches her fist already with a new sense of purpose. She stands up and announces that she has a gift for him as thanks for the tasty fish from. With a confident wink, she promises to give him something incredibly convenient. Nokul just looks back completely confused and doesn't understand what a depowered turtle god can offer. At that moment, a huge pile of driftwood floating in the water violently breaks apart. And this is because Nokul has already returned to work launching Recycle to gather a new batch of materials. Nokul, with his skill, assembles a giant glider and asks if this is exactly what Aspie meant. Aspie gives the go-ahead and orders him to fill it with the precious soil of the island. Then he shows his old shell is essentially a secret storeroom left by his former followers. And inside a whole garden of strangely looking fruits, and Nokul immediately wants to eat them. Aspie explains the plan is to take seeds from one of the fruits. Then he plants it in a bucket with the soil they just prepared. Next, Aspie throws this whole setup into Nokul Hall on a raft, and from this moment Nokul becomes even more confused. Our guy is already a bit worried. Where is all this heading? He asks again if they are really about to start a farm standing on a floating pile of logs, but Aspie advises him to relax. As soon as his little capsule hat begins to eerily dimly glow, he immediately strikes a pose like a back dancer and declares, the real show is about to begin. And with a scream, he unleashes the blessing of the great earth directly onto the raft. In the soil in the flower pot, bubbling immediately begins, clucking, bubbles, and in mere seconds from the earth just pop, a tiny sprout grows. Nokul's mind was blown. He, not believing his eyes, points at the instant plant. He immediately asks if this is Aspie's depowered god magic in action. Suddenly, Aspie's human form disappears, only empty clothes remain on the sand. He again became a tiny turtle, admitting that his charge was completely depleted, and that he was pushed back so hard for that dramatic appearance of his. Masbai explains if you pour the island's soil onto the raft, he can call it earth and bless it. Then he adds that the fruits they grow are incredibly moisturizing, so this way they finally solve the water problem. Aspie insists these magical fruits are essentially a full-fledged pharmacy that works on their root and prevents scurvy from developing. Nokul carefully picks up his tiny, ancient traveling companion of god tier. Our guy simply shines. He tells Aspie how happy he is that now they are a team. For a moment, the 10,000-year-old turtle really looks touched by kindness, but Aspie immediately gets embarrassed and tries to change the subject, definitely not used to praise. This poignant moment is interrupted by Aspie. He shouts that a big tide is coming too fast. Nokul immediately panics and shouts that he needs to gather more materials for the raft. When he starts collecting and stacking trash, Aspie asks if he really needs it, and Nokul stubbornly insists necessary. Then his little friend pokes a finger into the pile of trash and asks what the heck the plan is anyway. Without further words, Nokul dives back inside and grabs every bit of driftwood as soon as it comes into sight. After a long night of building, they just relax on their modernized raft, occasionally looking at the stars. In the morning, the raft looks truly impressive, and Nokul gives a well-deserved big thumbs up. Now it's no longer just a raft, he has built a whole deck with a mast, all from just waste. Aspie looks a little sad, probably already thinking that Nakal will now set sail and leave him behind. And then Nakal firmly plants his foot back into the island's sand, leaves the little turtle completely bewildered by this maneuver. If assuming the worst, Aspie begins his dramatic farewell monologue, says their time was short but sweet. He wishes the child a safe journey and has already fully come to terms with the fact that she will be abandoned again on this sandy shoal. So Nakal simply places a hand on the shell and says, "All right, Aspie, let's go." The brain of this turtle just froze. Wait, they are not being left behind. This little turtle god immediately panics and demands to know why. Damn it, he was kidnapped. Our guy just scratched the back of his head and explained that he decided Aspie wanted to go with him. Heavy-hearted, but Aspie says that, unfortunately, he cannot set off on the journey together with Nakal. He was the god of this great land, he says, but still failed when it was time to defend the home. Nakal simply throws him over his shoulder and pointed with a finger. All this is ancient history, now in the past. This ancient god looks completely confused, asks if maybe he is talking about his past failures. Our guy explains, as soon as the islanders advanced, Aspie's magic was no longer needed by them, they outgrew this necessity. Then he turns around with a huge smile and points again, as if to say, Aspie's abilities will actually prove very useful for his journey. Nakal looks him straight in the eyes and promises he will no longer allow himself to be useless. Instead, he will rework Aspie's power and give it a completely different purpose. And the little turtle god is thrown off track. His eyes fill with tears that really appear as if. Aspie tries to hide his face and grumbles as if there is no choice, but now he is completely in. For the first time in many years, the wind fills the sail. It's time to set off on a new journey. When they finally lift the anchor, Aspie declares that he will lend his divine power to this human boy. As soon as they set off, Nakal suddenly understands everything and raises his ring above the coil of rope. With a raft like this, he will finally be able to gather that one thing he has been thinking about all along. With the usual exclamation, "Recycle," he releases a giant burst of creative energy outward. The rope immediately twists and weaves, turning into a clever net. And bam, a perfect rope handrail appears just like that, and the raft becomes much safer. Aspie, now safely tied to the pole, casually calls this new creation a hammock. Nakal is simply delighted with the new hammock. Finally, he can sleep properly after ages on hard logs. Suddenly, a memory flashes in his mind about the old raft, where every wave could throw him straight into the sea. Even on the new deck, he looks with surprise at how incredibly stable their entire structure remains. Aspie smugly explains, his blessing to the great land is essentially a divine shock absorber for the raft. Realizing that he can build without capsizing the raft, Nakal feels a wild surge of creative energy. But just as he was about to start the next project, the body had completely different plans. This guy decides to give himself a quick, well-deserved rest in the middle of the open sea. And he seems to fade away, falling out of reality peacefully, gently rocking in his brand new trash hammocks. She immediately surrenders and at that very moment sends him headfirst onto the deck, squealing piercingly from pain. Getting up, Aspie frantically waves upward in shock, feverishly trying to get his attention. Nakal looks up and sees a giant winged figure. It blocks the sun. Several giant feathers slowly settle on the deck, and this only confirms very unwelcome guests have appeared. All color leaves his face as soon as he realizes what he is seeing, and he fervently prays that it is a mistake. The camera smoothly rises higher, showing the back of a woman with wings. She is described as a female likeness wrapped in bird feathers. Her legs have nothing human about them, massive, terrible bird claws that are about to tear apart. An old illustration testifies, before us is a legendary creature feared by all for its attacks on humans. The creature unfolds itself in all its beauty, and the text only confirms their worst fears. It is a harpy. The harpy looks down calmly and eerily, as if considering which of the possible new victims to choose next. Noelle stares endlessly in pure horror and barely manages to whisper the name of this creature. Aspie asks if they are really that dangerous, and our guy honestly admits this is his first time seeing one. It seems harpies are considered legendary. With one sweep they customarily mow down entire armies of ordinary soldiers. They are perceived as the natural enemy of all humans, so it is already beyond comprehension here. Without wasting a second, she dives headlong straight onto their small trash raft. Our guy immediately panics. He understands that his recycling skill is too slow to stop this. But still, he grabs the nearest junk, a pipe and a board, and mutters that he has no other choice. His brilliant plan is simply to start throwing any trash at the monster and shout for it to stay away. And this, of course, changes absolutely nothing. It doesn't stop her even for a moment. She slips so easily and gracefully through the flying pieces of trash, as if it were a slow cinematic ballet. Knockwell is already truly losing it with rage. His best defense is simply to throw trash. In a desperate moment of genius on the verge of madness, he grabs Aspie. This time it will definitely work, he thinks. And he just eats the 10,000-year-old turtle god on the harpy, and Aspie lets out a scream of horror. With no effort, the harpy sends Aspie into the ocean with a kick like a soccer ball. Divine help is out of the question now. Knockwell, furious, yells at her, accusing her of daring to kick his turtle friend. Completely ignoring her rage, the harpy flawlessly lands on the deck right in front of him. She just stares at him with a gaze eerily calm, almost a bored expression on her face. Her huge claws dig into the decking, and Knockwell stands armed with 2 sticks, a clear plan. He glanced stealthily at the ring. Cold reality overwhelmed him. There was no chance left to win this fight. But even understanding that by this he was stealing his own last way out, realizing there was no other choice, only trying remained. With full concentration, he activates his recycle skill on the board and secures it. Then he transforms it into a giant wooden paddle, demands an answer about what she wants, and insists that he has no money. But the harpy completely ignores his giant paddle and simply points to the hammock. Our guy remains standing in place, puzzled, and asks if she means the hammock he just made. She replies with a look, the same stone-cold, impassive one, as if the answer is obvious. Then she lets out a giant yawn, stretches her wings, and declares that she wants to use it. Noko is still frozen, ready for a fight to the death, but the legendary monster is just waiting for him. His face is an exact picture of what is happening right now. And without any warning, she dives headfirst straight into the rope trap. He can only watch intently while she gets more comfortable and demand, "Explain what is happening." At that moment, a very wet and furious Aspie flies onto the deck again, screaming madly that he was used as a projectile. But Quell immediately catches him, apologizes incessantly, and admits, yes, he was desperate then. Aspie asks whether that legendary army monster really does not pose a danger. Meanwhile, the legendary beast has simply completely switched off in the hammock. She sleeps so peacefully that it seems there is not a single thought of murder in her head. Noelle carefully tries to get her attention, probably to ask her to leave right now. Waking up, she introduces herself as Murmursig. The tongue gets tangled. He is still on guard and asks if she is sure she did not come here to attack him. But the Whisperer only drags her voice and says that she actually does not hate people at all. It turned out her only true passion in life is simply to have a very, very successful dream. The memory reveals the truth without embellishment. She was literally kicked out of the clan simply because she was too lazy. And since then she kept darting across the sky, prowling with her gaze in search of a cozy place where she could flop down and finally rest. Noko sobs incessantly, unable to take her eyes off. She is overwhelmed with sympathy as she listens to that tragic story about how Noko was a professional napper. She wipes her tears and tells Aspie that she completely understands. They are both outcasts, each in their own way. So he officially introduces himself and sets about arranging for their new freeloader so that Aspie feels at home. Murmursig asks where that garbage truck is even sailing to, and Knockall honestly admits they are just drifting. And he immediately clarifies his grand dream, to turn this raft into a real floating city. Aspie's brain, this tiny armadillo, shorts out from the sheer audacity of that statement. Even the legendary beast is taken aback and asks again if he really just said city. Knockall explains, in his kingdom, people strangely disliked recycling and using garbage that was still perfectly suitable. So his plan is to use his ring and pull an entire city out of the trash, just to prove he is right. He decided to prove it once and for all. Even worthless things can serve people and uplift a nation. Silent looks at him without averting his gaze. It is clear that this guy was touched by an overly ambitious dream. Our guy is stubborn to the bone. You can't shake his convictions. He is dead set on this garbage city. After thinking a bit, she turns around and announces that she has already made up her mind. With a dramatic gesture, she declares, this raft will become her new nest. Welcome to the new neighbor. Knockwell looks at them stunned and asks if she really intends to move in with them. She replies that if he builds the city, she will finally be able to sleep and no one will bother her anymore. Her imagination immediately jumps to a luxurious canopy bed. Saliva almost drips just at the thought of it. So Knockall just winks, welcoming another outcast to their, to put it mildly, very quirky team. Then he moves straight to business without any prelude and asks if she has any skills that might be useful for their new cooperative. Before she can even gather her answer, her gaze is fixed on something floating nearby in the water. She barely shows her skill, crushing a coconut as easily as if squeezing a grape. And then she hands them freshly squeezed juice and asks if anyone wants a drink. Noelle is simply stunned, and her attempt to carry on a conversation delicately immediately fails in the worst sense of the word. How she accidentally breaks the wooden bowl with that same everyday force. Murmursig bursts into a fuss and admits she is much better at breaking than being gentle. Aspie says that Hesh destroyed the only bed, and Nokul simply replies that he will make another one. She asks if he is serious, and our guy confirms, but with one tiny problem. He points to the empty drawer and recalls how he threw all his building materials right at her head. To build something new, he will need wood, fabric, and rope, and all of this is currently at sea. So they will have to rummage through the endless ocean in search of even better trash, pulling it out and saving it. As soon as she hears this, Murmursig catches the idea, and Nokul simply strokes her head and tells her not to worry. Then she lowers her head with a determined look and completely confuses our guy. And with a huge flap of wings, she instantly launches herself into the sky like a rocket. Nokul and Aspie can only watch as their new resident rises into the sky and rushes into the distance. Close up on her face, now she is fully on a mission. Suddenly an axe bursts out of the sky and flies straight at the raft. Behind it, a whole table splashing as it falls into the water, a special delivery. It turns out Murmursig is already on a high-speed trash run picking up junk for him. She sharply turns around and flies back, dropping the last of her loot with impressive speed. Then she lands perfectly back on the deck, clearly satisfied with what she managed to bring. Nokvil is completely stunned by the pile of quality trash she managed to return in just minutes. He is practically glowing, realizing that to collect this himself, he would need a whole half-day. She looks almost humiliated, admitting that her family always called her slow and useless. Here is the proof. Z. Without any hesitation, Nokul gives her a comforting tap on the head and declares that she is cool. With a huge smile, he truly thanks her, emphasizing that her help is an incredible time saver. He looks her straight in the eyes and insists she is by no means slow or worthless. These words hit right in the heart. She blushes and fully swallows the praise. Turning on full power, Nokul immediately gets to work, ready to disassemble and rework the entire stack in one go. His ring flashes instantly as soon as he tries to rework everything, but something clearly goes wrong. Instead, this very whole nest of trash breaks loose and tears so hard that the backward strike scatters shards everywhere. Instead of raw material, he, unwillingly, spills out a bright, chaotic mess, a shack. Our guy's face is like a perfect snapshot of what the hell just happened. And all this unstable mush immediately collapses right on him, to Aspie's horror. Looking at the ruins, Sig quietly admits she was afraid he wouldn't handle such a volume at once. From under the debris rises only one gesture, a thumbs up, as if he is still alive somewhere. He was crushed by a board and he is completely confused, unable to understand why the skill failed so spectacularly. Aspie hovers above the ground with a sad face, as if he already knows why everything fell apart. This turtle god points to a strange bracelet. The plaque says that part of this trash weapon was made from undefined materials. Nokul wipes the dust off himself and freezes, completely bewildered by the very concept of trash, which he apparently does not know. Aspie stands over mysterious things and confidently says his analysis skill will figure out what these things are. Aspie adds that the recycling skill works perfectly on simple raw materials like wood and rope. Problems begin when you try to process the entire complex composite junk together. It's a direct recipe for failure and collapse. And only then does Nokul finally have a flash of insight. He understands why his grand creation turned against him. He recalls how he once tried to recycle a pile of magical armor, but instead of restoration, everything fell apart. Our guy immediately freezes sadly, deciding that he has reached the limit of his own power. But Aspie encourages him with a short conversation and honestly admits, even God cannot do too much if he has just begun. Nokul says the whole point is to understand your own power, to know what you can really handle and what you cannot. With renewed determination, he concludes, his first step is to find out what his skill definitely cannot cope with. So the time has come for the most exciting part of any adventure, sorting the trash. He immediately calls Murmursig, the one who just stands nearby, and is completely baffled by this very idea. With a clear plan, Nokul raises his ring, a spark and forward, ready for another attempt. He kneels before a dirty pile of safe junk and promises himself that this time he will succeed. The ring flashes and his thoughts boil down to one thing: to assemble the best bed for the new neighbor. But as soon as he concentrates, his thoughts are snatched away by a memory: an incredibly ornate, very familiar rocking chair. And there sits a man, majestic in appearance, calmly flipping through a book in a room impossibly luxurious. The scene shifts to this luxurious hall of his past. The man raises his gaze and seems to summon nostalgia and memory. When the servant pours him a drink, the man says that this chair reminds him of something. Then this luxurious glass is placed on a small table right next to him. The self-satisfied servant starts a conversation about His Majesty Gistra and the unpleasant garbage prince. The man in the chair, probably Gistra, simply closes his eyes and leaves a calm, all-knowing smile. A sharp flashback pulls us to two boys, Gistra and Nokul, who are fighting at their mother's feet. Next, Gistra picks up a book. The pages are already open, and he demonstrates his imaginary intellectual superiority. Now he is an adult sprawled on the very throne and gloating because he has monopolized everything. He even snorts. Supposedly his brother wanted this chair for himself, but in the end died on a log with a precious stone. Return to the present time, the raft quietly creaks on the water, and these memories have long been left behind. And what a gift! Nokul and Murmursig collapsed into brand new custom-built lounge chairs. Their little raft was turned into a full-fledged floating terrace, even with an umbrella. Murmursig sleeps so deeply in her new bed that she looks utterly satisfied for the first time in a long time. Meanwhile, Noko simply enjoys the best life, sipping coconut through a straw. Waking up, she cannot believe that he made such a comfortable home out of a pile of junk. Our guy lifts his sleep mask and proudly declares that he imagined the best bed he ever knew. Yet he admits, since this is only a copy, it is probably not as good as the original. But Murmursig immediately stops the conversation, stating that he is completely wrong about this. Blushing a little, she tells him that this is really the first time she has ever felt anything like this. She actually dreamed of being held by her mother simply because this bed seemed so safe. With a truly gentle smile, she sincerely thanks both Nokul and Aspie for their kindness. Nokul just beams and throws a huge thumbs up, while Aspie immediately and completely looks away, embarrassed to the edge. Bringing them all back down to earth, Aspie asks what they will do next. She points out the obvious problem: to build a city, much more is needed than just random trash from the ocean. And our guy has to agree. He just realized that the lack of resources for his dream is a colossal obstacle. Aspie notes, to really expand, they need to find trash somewhere other than the ocean. But the whisper of Murmursig always reminds them, no land is in sight, yet Nokul seems unconcerned as long as he is dozing. Besides, she suddenly remembers how during the flight she picked up all sorts of trash, a small souvenir for the road. It turns out she noticed something that looked like a whole island in the distance. A giant lonely spire, no living soul, but at the top, a real treasure trove of old trash just lying there. Nokul's eyes nearly popped out of his head. A whole island of premium, untouched trash, and without hesitation, she jumps to her feet and rushes off, loudly announcing that their next destination is officially decided. It is. He immediately activates his recycle skill and is ready to turn their patio raft into a real serious upgrade. This umbrella and other details are dismantled by a flash of light, as if understanding that they cannot be left in place. And this was remade into a new sail and mast. Now there is movement in everything. Do you hear, dude? His shirt is conveniently unbuttoned. Nokul points to the horizon and declares that their search for unknown trash has just begun. Thus their little raft at full speed turns into a real yacht, cutting through the waves and finally having a goal. While they are sailing, Nokul decides it's time to pump up the skills a bit. He looks quite pleased with himself and notes that his strength now feels simply wonderful. His practical material is that mysterious intricate scepter mirror, which they previously could not identify. And he has already figured it all out. Now he can recycle magical items, though only if he has a few other materials for the work. Our guy clearly understands. With more training, the possibilities of his skills will become simply incredible. Suddenly Aspie shouts from the fog, they have finally reached the destination. Nokul is completely stunned by the scale of this place, while Murmursig just yawns as if everything is happening past him. He confirms that this is exactly the place. Here everything is gathered from high-quality junk, and she responds as if to say, here it is. Nokul is simply trembling with delight, ready to take on that sweet pile of trash, but Aspie throws in a sharp argument. The island is a solid rock, and there is nowhere to land properly. She is also quite sure all that trash on top is most likely useless to anyone, just vanity. Hearing these words, Murmur Sig begins to get nervous. It turns out she led them without any sense and made an overly useless detour. And our guy just pulls out a grin that screams, "I have full and absolute faith in trash." Without blinking, he tells her not to worry and glances upward at the colossal spire, as if he has already made a decision. Raising the ring, he explains, "You never know the true value of a thing until you try to recycle it." The decision has already ripened, and he immediately turns sharply, starting to prepare for the ascent. You unpack the box and pull out a huge roll like a real canvas. He immediately understands, to climb that steep rock wall, he will have to craft truly serious climbing gear. At that very moment, Murmursig gently touches his shoulder with the tip of her wing. She offers a ridiculously simple solution. Why not just fly up and get it for him? Our guy freezes for a moment, then happily hands her a large piece of fabric like a temporary bag. Barely nodding, she takes off into the sky, ready for another express delivery run. While she's gone, Aspie calls Nokwal to the edge of the raft, to take a look with at least one eye. He squats by the turtle god, leans over, and curiously peers into the murky waters below. The water is amazingly clear. Through it, you can see all sorts of sunken objects on the ocean floor. And by objects, I mean a huge city completely submerged in the abyss. It just lies right beneath them. Nokwal's face literally explodes with joy, a true paradise for anyone who loves any kind of junk. He just freezes in place, trying to comprehend. All this time, an entire metropolis was hiding beneath the waves. Our guys put it all together and concluded, this spiral is probably the top of a giant flooded tower, right? Just in time, Murmursig breaks away from above and flies here with their express delivery from Spire's Peak. With a huge smile, Nokwal prepares to inspect his brand new pile of high-altitude trash. This is. The sack opens and fragments pour out of it, like a broken ancient cannon barrel. This pile of junk leaves Nokwal completely bewildered. He has never seen anything like it. Aspie floats over the roof forward to take a closer look and notices something familiar in these strange mechanical parts. And the turtle god drops a lore bomb, a weapon of an ancient civilization, a magical cannon. This revelation throws Nokwal off track, and he immediately asks Aspie for more details. Aspie, the font of all ancient knowledge, suddenly falls silent and looks away, way too suspicious. He explains this is a destructive weapon. A special formula allows it to release powerful magical bursts. Holding the fragments, Nokwal's first thought is not, "Oh no, his weapon," but "I wonder if I can fix this." This turtle god says he probably can fix it. He has seen all kinds of weapons at home. And in our boy's head, gears click as he tries to retrieve a specific memory. Memory clicks and he suddenly recognizes something very similar already happened to him at the oldest landfill in his kingdom. In an instant, he is enlightened. He decided that he could assemble this if he takes the staff as a base. And what do you know about that mysterious magical scepter they found earlier? It fits this job perfectly. Without wasting a second, he activates his recycle skill and the ancient parts flash and, as if by magnets, fly together. These broken pieces and fragments thunder into place, and magic moment by moment stacks them into a single solid form. And so the ancient magical cannon is fully restored, so the entire crew freezes, not taking their eyes off it, and says not a word. Nokwal bursts with excitement over his new toy. Every floating raft needs an ancient superweapon. Nokwal, absolutely ridiculously excited about the new toy, decides it's time to test it with some shooting. He slaps his palm on the charging port, ready to pour energy here with his own magic. And the guy starts pouring all the power he has into the strike, groaning from the incredible tension. He strains with all his might, his face turns red, while Murmursig just watches without the slightest hint of reaction, as if he doesn't care. While he gives it his all, she just falls asleep, so much for support from the corner of the eye. And so, Nokwal, completely exhausted after a record-short attempt, collapses onto the deck. He is totally worn out but still gets up and declares that at least he managed to load it. With gloomy determination, he grabs the fuse, ready for the big moment. He shouts fire with the dramatic luxury of an experienced general, only for the cannon to emit a pathetic quiet pop and spit out a puff of smoke. Our guy just stands still with an indifferent, dead smile, digesting the complete disaster of the test launch. Now. He sulks, convinced that magic is not for him, and the whisper Sig gives him pathetic support, and Aspie simply exhales and seems to say, "All right, I'll do it myself." A halo of water gathering in the air flares up above him. Suddenly, a dazzling flash of light bursts from the tiny shell, and Knuckle flinches from the shock. As soon as the light fades, Aspie appears already in a fully human form and loudly declares that he is taking full control. Her hand touches the cannon, and it immediately glows with a light full of truly divine power. That magical bucket on the side instantly fills to the brim, shining with bright light. Under her control, she grabs the firing mechanism and asks if that's all it has. With a slight self-satisfied smile, she says her shot will be a bit better than the prince's sad attempt. And she releases a huge energy beam that tears the ocean surface just like that, little better. The shot posture unleashes a dazzling beam, and just one recoil knocks Knuckle far back. Her shot cuts a huge breach through the spire itself, smashing the upper half to smithereens. Our guy screams at the top of his lungs, ringing in his ears, and Murmursig just indulgently admires himself. Peering into the new hole, they immediately notice a hidden camera, and Aspie casually admits, "Missed a bit." This kid is still losing his mind, shouting at full strength, "What have you done?" That tiny mistake disrupted the balance of the entire spire. Now it is actively falling. A giant boulder breaks free from the cliff and flies straight at their floating patio grate. Knuckle shouts for everyone to evacuate immediately. Falling rocks are about to crush them. This guy makes a desperate sprint along the deck, trying to dodge the impending apocalypse. One glance over the shoulder and confirms, yes, they are about to be crushed. Turns his gaze and sees, a giant boulder will crush him completely in a moment. And at the last second, Murmursig cuts in with a rocket hail and flies in with a flying strike immediately with both legs. Vertilands connects, and a boulder the size of a house explodes in a cloud of dust and small gravel. On the deck, Knuckle is completely drenched by a squall of splashes. He is safe but stunned. After everything, they all stand on the raft and finally realize it was incredibly close to the end. Our guy just collapses, admitting that he actually thought he was about to become a permanent resident of the ocean floor. Even a quiet murmur from her, it seems she already feels the consequences. She spasmodically clenches her leg because it hurts a little. Agreeing, Knuckle offers her any reward she wants, and she is clearly interested in this offer. His gaze softens and a light blush appears on her cheek. She looks at him attentively, with serious expectation. And her big reward for saving his life from inevitable death is just a barely noticeable pat on the head. Knuckle is completely confused because Murmursig simply turns his back to him. Then he hesitantly reaches out and asks if the head pad is exactly what she is looking for. And she literally melts confirmation that this is exactly the 5-star treatment she wanted. Our guy apologizes for being so slow-witted, while Aspie just silently watches as this whole awkward quarrel unfolds right before him. This turtle goddess explains, without fans, her magic has been too weak for centuries. When she ran to charge the cannon, she completely miscalculated her own power level. It turned out that their faith in her gave her a gigantic boost, and she didn't account for that at all. Knuckle's mind explodes, and it was faith in the little star that enhanced the cannon, not just raw magic. He suddenly smiles broadly, telling Aspie that there's nothing to apologize for at all. In fact, he's thrilled. Finally, they have a real weapon to defend themselves. Aspie intervenes and immediately delivers bad news, looking down at the cracked deck. So about that weapon, one shot and it smashed everything to pieces again, so Knuckle panicked. Having not a second to lose, he pulls out his recycle skill to stop the cannon from falling apart into dust. He's barely holding on, but Aspie points out, the outer shell is still broken. Knuckle realizes he needs much better materials, otherwise this thing will keep breaking on him. It was then that he quietly whispered, taking 6 steps forward, and extended his wing to her for some inexplicable reason. At that very moment, a huge dark figure approaches through the clouds. Aspie, in panic, admits that the thick fog with which it was going to act has completely covered the approach. Cold sweat runs down Knuckle's face as he freezes, staring at the gloomy, threatening silhouette looming over him. Aspie, already in human form, grimly concludes, if this is Elkin Navy, they are finished. Murmursig's eyes narrow as she finally confirms that she has spotted the approaching vessel, and a massive battered galleon emerges from the fog, a genuine ghost ship. Its hull is completely shattered, as if it not only wandered through fear but actually went through a fight. Moreover, the tattered sails proudly display an unexpectedly cute, cat-oriented Jolly Roger. This is definitely a pirate ship, and it looks as if it has already survived its best centuries. Knuckle and Murmursig are dumbfounded with panic. She senses a dangerous aura from the ship. Our guy just freezes and looks in shocked disbelief, even confirming to himself, yes, pirates are officially on the menu. Aspie immediately bursts into a panic, shouting at them to get out of there before they are noticed. And Knockwell just stares at the ship, on his face not fear, but a focused, thoughtful expression. He notes this is more of a shipwreck than an active threat. There is not a single living soul from the crew nearby. Lowering his gaze from the huge vessel, he sees the wounds speak for themselves. It was hit by cannonballs, accurately, right on target. So he puts two and two together. The crew most likely disappeared long ago. And then a tiny light bulb flashes above our guy's head. He loves trash, simply adores it. He joyfully declares that the abandoned ship is essentially a floating treasure trove of garbage. Maspai can't believe his eyes and asks if he really intends to board it, while he just smiles crookedly, holding a rope in his hands. While he tightens their raft with ropes, Aspie mutters that this is exactly why he earned his title Garbage Prince. He takes it as a compliment, asks her not to praise him so much. Zero self-awareness, but complete confidence. His logic is simple. Pirates are known for collecting treasures from all over the world. For that ghost ship to get exactly those high-quality materials, it needs to permanently fix the cannon. Without wasting a minute, he asks Mermersig for air transport to the deck, and she readily agrees. Her mime Mermersig simply melts from the caresses on the head, the height of luxury, it seems, just for her. But the tender moment is broken when she suddenly pushes him forcefully onto the deck and, screaming in pain, drives a blow into him. It turns out her leg still hurts a lot after the blow she had earlier, crushed so hard that the stones could have shattered. She says that Knockwell is incredibly fragile for a human, and he just sits in place completely bewildered. Brushing dust off his clothes, our guy gets to his feet, filled with determined fire to finally closely examine the ghost ship. Barely do they reach the cabin door when a shadowy silhouette slips past the window for a moment. Mermersig immediately exposes this and warns, she definitely saw a person inside. Noko responds with a furious snarl. The trash hunt cannot be stopped. His brilliant plan is simply to approach and politely ask the potential pirates for their junk. Without any hesitation, he throws the doors wide open and walks right inside as if the place belongs to him. The view that unfolds before him makes his eyes almost pop out of his head. For the entire cabin is filled with silent armored warriors to the brim, wall to wall. Our guy, not fully catching the mood, cheerfully greets them on surviving the shipwreck. And then helmets rise and a whole undead army with red, burning eyes bursts out. The whole crew together loses their minds, roaring with absolute horror as soon as they are revealed. Without wasting time, one of the skeleton knights rushes forward and immediately cuts Nokul with a sword. From this blow, he is thrown back across the deck. He barely manages to free himself from the deadly strike. From the floor, Aspie shouts help everyone, saying that they are actually skeletons. Thanks for the news. Murmur, stepping forward, switches to defense, understanding. The necromancer must be controlling these bodies. With a quiet growl, teeth grinding, another skeletal soldier lunges in attack to finish off. Mermersig instantly intercepts the strike, delivering a precise blow right to the skeleton's stomach. This armored corpse flies back, thrown by the pure force of her protective fury. Continuing, she stomps with her huge claw right through his arm, pinning him to the deck. The swing of the sword is deflected to the side, and she presses it down, completely neutralizing the threat. Nokul just stares at the floor, completely stunned by the sudden fury of his guardian. This skeleton hunchedly rattles its teeth while her claws are already approaching for the finishing blow. And with one devastating squeeze, she completely crushes his spine, leaving only dust. She glances at the others as if deliberately challenging them, just try to wound her dear prince. And she simply begins a furious rampage, kicking, tearing apart all the undead in a continuous storm. Meanwhile, Nokul and Aspie, pressed against the wall and tremble, pure fear overwhelms them from the terrible bloody chaos. She has already dealt with the last one. Mermersig managed to look around and, settling down contentedly, enjoys the havoc, the one and only job. Our guy, finally relaxed, thanks her for pulling them out of the bony apocalypse. And then one of the broken skeletal figures on the floor begins to magically reassemble. Everyone watches in horror as the entire undead army begins to rise from the pile of scrap metal. Before Mermersig can turn around and react, one of the reanimated skeletons grabs her from behind. It clings with a deadly grip to her wing, and the empty eye sockets of Mermersig stare straight at him. And then the rest of the horde rushes in as a solid crowd, pressing so hard that she can no longer move. Nokul shouts her name, watching as the only line of defense left completely covers and tears apart the crowd. In despair, he lunges forward and tries to pull one of the bone creatures off her back. But his strength is already at zero. He shouts that he cannot move even a finger under that iron grip. While the metal boot presses him to the ground, Aspie with tears in his eyes explains, once they were proud warriors. They were created to recycle the fallen in war into an immortal army, the necromancer's dream, his best team. Murmursig is in utter despair. It is disgusting and terrifying even to imagine how he will desecrate those who died in battle. Pressed to the ground, she remains in place, and one of the skeletons again shifts his gaze to Nockwell, ready to finish the job. He lowers his sword for a deadly strike, but the blade crumbles to pieces as soon as it touches the floor. This skeleton just stands in place, completely stunned, not understanding why his weapon suddenly turns to dust. Meanwhile, Aspie completely gives up, whining that it is all over for them. But Nockwell firmly sets his foot on the deck and refuses to go down, not giving any resistance. He engages in battle against the bony soldier already ready to clash, though the chances are terribly slim. Both he and Aspie both scream in complete unfiltered panic, terrified to madness. The eye of this skeleton glows dimly and, as if sawing a path, aims at our guy as at its next victim. Suddenly everything slows down and freezes. The skeleton looks at its own hand, which seems to be crumbling into pieces. It turns out Nockwell grabbed the sword by the hilt and, using his recycle skill, disassembles it so that it disappears again. In a flash of light, the weapon completely falls apart and the skeleton remains completely unarmed. Wasting not a second, Nockwell immediately responds with a fierce swing of his own blade. His strike tosses the skeleton's head into the air. It flies off the shoulders. While the body below convulses spasmodically, he thinks one thing: to stop them, the head must be separated. This is truly a great discovery, but Murmursig continues to besiege the rest of the bony gang. At that very moment, another skull fell onto the deck with a loud crash. As soon as the skeletons were disassembled, Nockwell abruptly dashed to the side of Murmursig and he thanks him for the rescue. Aspie shows her skillkibo, since the ability to recycle is the perfect answer. It simply dissolves their weapons. This small hint from Aspie is enough for him to launch a new plan based on trash. He thinks if the skeletons are just a pile of trash with the same trash armor, then he can recycle the whole bundle. This finally explains the whole story with the ghost ship. The crew never left, they just became bony. For now, Aspie is a puddle of relieved turtle tears, completely overwhelmed by the almost deadly experience. She calls him by name and our boy just looks down, completely unaware of what is happening this time. Aspie points to the neighboring door and says she feels a barely noticeable human presence inside. The hero complex in Noko immediately activates. He decides that the skeletons are besieging some poor soul inside. So he just frantically knocks on the door like a scared courier, asking if anyone is home. Not waiting for an answer, he pokes the handle and realizes it's locked tight, a bad sign. He immediately understood the lock was not put on just like that. She was barricaded from the other side for protection. Before he manages to make a plan, Murmursig steps forward and orders, retreat and let her handle everything. She spreads her wings. It's clear that a crash is about to happen that can't be hidden and in a moment she sharply turns around and with all her might delivers a kick straight to the door. Her foot mercilessly turns the door inside out. Boards and fragments fly everywhere, scattering splashes of ruins. As if casually, she asks if that was enough, and Nockwell simply bites into her with his gaze. The memory of her terrible strength in battle does not let go. Of course, he tells her that she was extremely helpful and rewards her with another 5-star head pat. Making their way through the ruins, they find themselves in a place that looks like the captain's cabin, but his investigation is cut short as suddenly a dark creature with claws looms over him. And this terrible monster is the pirate captain, who is completely unconscious and lying on the floor. Noko leans forward and suddenly realizes the terrifying pirate captain is actually just a girl. He is embarrassed and openly confused. How can someone so young be a pirate and with such equipment? In a whisper-calm voice, she says that it's just unconsciousness, and our guy exhales a huge, relieved breath. And suddenly he is overwhelmed by a terrible memory and he panics, beginning to fear any other survivors on this cursed ship. Putting fear aside, Murmursig begins to examine the captain, checking for wounds, while Nockwell sincerely thanks her. She carefully lifts the girl's leg to take a closer look at possible injuries. And indeed, on the leg she finds a cut, apparently left after an attack by the skeleton crew. Nockwell immediately switches to hero mode and vows to find some medicine for her right now. And he starts rummaging through the nearest drawer because even a hero needs to dig around and take the loot. Tell me, you are the voice of reason. Ask if helping a random pirate is really a good idea. And Nokul explains he saw their flag even before they boarded, so probably they are not enemies. He points out that the cute cat on the logo means this is a privateer ship from the Arking Kingdom. So it turns out she is a pirate authorized by the state, essentially, a state threat that spreads fear. Previously, the Arking Kingdom suffered from massive pirate attacks. Their plan was simple: hire pirates to hunt other Asterix pirates, a classic fight fire with fire. Asp simply breaks down, sobbing and insisting that he is an idiot because he risked everything for some elite junk. And suddenly the pirate captain's eye snaps open, as if the time for dozing officially ended. Murmursig did not flinch, she only threw her usual good morning at her. This greeting throws the captain into complete panic. He screams and, jumping up, flies upward. She lands on all fours, fires a demand to name who they are, and reveals that she is a catgirl pirate. She crouches low in defense, ready to jump out and attack these strangers. Squinting in fierce flames, she measures the strangers who just kicked down her door. This catgirl immediately dashed away, trying to push off and create distance from the giant winged woman. But Murmursig catches her right in the air and asks if she is okay, while the captain catches a mouthful of feathers. Nokul rushes forward with a first aid kit, trying to ease the tension, and assures they are not enemies. He opens the box with medicine and says that the skeletons have disappeared and her leg needs to be examined immediately. The captain is still fussing with treatment, but now just clings to Murmursig like to the last thread, and Murmursig looks completely indifferent to this. Our guy starts bandaging her leg and apologizes that his skills are far from professional medicine. After she is patched up and bandaged, she finally finds the strength to thank so calmly that she can now be talked to. This captain officially apologizes for losing his temper and properly thanks them for the rescue. It turns out her name is Ginias, and she is the captain of this ship, Golden Lynx. Murmursig states his name and responds with his usual restrained, unwavering expression. Genius is still very confused, but Murmursig just casually waves his hand, dismissing her apology. Then Aspie steps forward to introduce himself because someone like Talking Turtle cannot be forgotten. And this immediately drives the captain into a new outburst of shouting, "Talking Turtle." Finally, our guy introduces himself confidently, with a self-assured smile, "Nokal Arking." And that surname Arking makes her eyes widen sharply, and a sudden, conscious horror flashes in them. Brazenly, without stopping at all, he asks if she has any junk that can be taken, and in response, the girl is completely overturned. She freezes in a stupor. Suddenly, a click goes off in her head. She recognizes him as Nokul Arking, our ruthless criminal with the skill of a deadly curse. And our guy just stands there sweating, completely not understanding why his name instantly caused a panic attack. Jinya draws the blade, swearing to capture Noko before his curse can harm anyone else. Our guy is just trying to calm her down, but she is literally hovering in the air, pure, uncontrollable panic. Aspie shouts that his terrible reputation has spread much further than they thought. Despite the remarks, Genius orders him to prepare. He must be ready to stop the criminal known worldwide. She jerks her leg, breaks from the spot, and rushes forward as if about to strike a heroic attack. But Nokul just holds a shard of the sword in his hand, outraged, confused, and completely baffled by everything happening. Seeing this, she freezes solid, and her face at that moment becomes not just green as if about to vomit bile. Her hand flies to her mouth as she looks at Aspie. Her attack shoots straight out of her head. And then she just vomits like from a cannon. Her stomach turns inside out and everything immediately goes overboard. Truly a magnificent sight. The very next moment, the mop switches to serious training mode, tidies the deck without unnecessary words. Nokul grumbles about the terrible mess, while Murmursig just watches completely unperturbed, as if it's supposed to be that way. Jinya sits nearby and is extremely embarrassed. She has been identified again as a rival against the enemy. It turns out the mighty pirate captain has a severe, desperate seasickness, and unfortunately, this turns out to be very timely. He tells her again that they are not enemies and adds in almost the same tone, she really cannot help his condition. Then she explains that her dream is to become a great privateer like her father, but her career went downhill after an unfortunate incident during a naval training battle. The ship exploded then. Nokul repeats his words again with just a look, one that clearly shows he is sure it was an accident. Just thinking about it, and Jinya immediately gets the same facial expression, as if she is about to be overcome by nausea. He quickly orders her to be silent if it might provoke another round of deck scrubbing, and simply looks away, completely confused and embarrassed by all this ordeal. Genius explains if she cannot control it, this ship is doomed to become junk, and The word garbage immediately grabs all of Nokel's attention, without division. She remembers how at the Naval Academy they hammered into her, a ship without a captain is just scrap. This is no more than a pile of floating junk one that is about to sink to the bottom of the sea. When her crew disappeared and the dream shattered, she feels like a complete failure. This ship belonged to her father, and she spent her whole life dreaming of following in his footsteps. After he disappeared, she decided to take his place and spent years learning how to be him. But her fierce seasickness twists her body so much that she is unable to properly give orders to the ship. Noel listens to her entire tragic story, and a brilliant idea forms in his mind. He agrees if she gives up, the ship will truly turn into worthless trash, and that is not at all like the motivational speech she was waiting for, judging by the expression on her face. Murmurzig adds, even with his abilities, they are not the sailors who can help. To prove his point, Nokul simply snaps and tears a piece of wood from the nearest table. He lifts the broken plank, and his recycle skill activates right before their eyes. In a bright flash of light, the broken wood begins to fold, form, and restructure, and he proudly presents her with a masterfully made miniature table, as if he just crafted it. Jinya simply froze and stared, her brain completely fried from the magic she had just witnessed. He tells her that traveling with a criminal is risky, but she can use his strength to reach the shore. But she still skeptically pokes with her finger, as if the whole ship is a complete ruin. Our guy asks to arrange a grand tour to be sure to see exactly what kind of trash he will have to work with. Genius reluctantly agrees to his trash tour, but still does not fully understand what to think about this guy. So Nokul simply picks her up on his back. Walking on foot, of course, is only for losers. When he carries her outside, she thanks him, but immediately notices how much the ship is rocking. And that alone is enough for her seasickness to hit again, and Nokul loses his balance. Another majestic round, stomach contents fly like projectiles, and our heroes watch it all completely casually. They decide to move briefly to their much smaller and seemingly much less stable raft. After that, Nokul quickly rinses himself with water. Every hero needs a shameless, shirtless scene. Genius again starts apologizing almost against their will, while Nokul just stands with the expression of someone who has already accepted the fate of a cleaner. Aspie says that they all just need to lie down on the raft a bit and calm down, and this sounds like a terrible idea for a pirate suffering from seasickness. Genius nervously stands next to Murmursig, probably calculating what new greeting awaits her. And then she suddenly realizes the incredible. For the first time in her life, she is on the water and does not start feeling sick. It turns out Aspie uses her ability to bless the earth to stabilize the raft with magical roots. Genius is stunned, and Aspie explains that she used to constantly help rescue sailors after shipwrecks. In her memories, she repeatedly uses her ability, calming the waves so ships could safely pass. They say it was thanks to her that trade routes became noticeably safer. She recalls this warmly, but new magical devices from other nations made her powers useless, a classic story about how automation takes jobs. Jinna listens attentively, her heart aching for the little talkative turtle with a tragic past. Aspie finished her story and explained, over time her island sank, so she was left completely alone for many ages. A flicker of determination trembles in her gaze. She is not just a victim. Nokul absorbs all this, a serious expression on his face as he learns about his friend's lonely story. After Nokul heard Aspie's tragic story, he dresses in a new, steel determination. Aspie said he is supposedly a kind-hearted trash lover, but don't let yourself spoil the genie ship. Genius just stands silently in place and is still trying to gather this strange, crazy team together. She finally admits staying on their raft might become the only salvation from seasickness. Since the ship is doomed anyway, practically a corpse, she decides, let it go to work, not sink. With despair in her eyes, she solemnly entrusts Nokul with her father's favorite ship. Our guy just grins broadly, shining with pleasure to accept the challenge, to rebuild the entire galleon. And he announces his grand plan to use the ship's materials to wildly expand their raft. First in line, a full walk through the trash, to sift the useful from all the junk without hesitation. And then Aspie, as if casually, turns into a real human girl, and Jinya remains completely stunned. When the team is already assembled, Nokul takes the reins into his own hands and launches the most chaotic property rescue operation in the world. He sharply throws his hand forward and activates his recycle skill with such wild, dramatic pathos, as if it were a scene on the verge of explosion. And now, all the saved wood and materials instantly become neat, orderly stacks. In a moment, their tiny raft is already attached to the huge, newly built wooden deck. The whole team finally takes a well-deserved lunch break on the new platform and looks like a real coordinated team. He even built separate beds for them. This is no longer a raft but a floating studio apartment. Now these remnants of golden chains just hang in the air, pure trash, dismantled into parts. But Nokul is not finished yet. He activates his power one last time and a glowing magical circle flares around with the words T. With a triumphant shout and a tiny spirit on his shoulder, he solemnly proclaims, "The project is complete." And then he unfolds before them their new home, a giant multi-story floating settlement built from that old ship. Nokul announces that they are finally approaching another sea city and looks too proud of his floating settlement. He even crafted a separate trash bin, because you see, his priorities are arranged that way. Moreover, on this famous raft, he arranged a proper toilet and wash basin. Our guy solemnly shows the new hut a real protection against bad weather, walls and roof without any compromises. He honestly admits, with these materials he cannot assemble a magic cannon, but there is still a chance for next time. And then he easily and confidently knocked on one of the new doors. Check Murmursig, she has already settled in the new bed and, it seems, finally found her home here. She confirms, incredibly comfortable, and it looks like she can finally exhale and be calm. They have a brief moment, she thanks him and Nokul is simply happy that she approved. But as soon as Jinya appears, all the good mood instantly flies away from Noko. He starts with frantic apologies for turning her father's ship into an additional alloy, but Genius is actually torn apart. Tears paper tells him that this is not at all what he thinks. In fact, she is completely and finally touched by what he did. She explains that all her life she has heard only one thing, how his recycle skill is called a useless curse. Taking a step forward, she prepares to put everything in its place. This former captain extends his hand and declares that in reality, this is an incredibly wonderful talent to touch the wall he built from the remains of her ship. With a blush, she sincerely thanks him for preserving the memories of her father. Noelle simply throws a confident big thumbs up and unconditionally soaks up the praise, bathing in it as if in warmth. When everyone finally rises in unison, he clarifies, does she know the way to the Naval Academy? Genius tells him to wait and pulls out some quirky navigation instrument right on the go. She busies herself with the sextant to determine her location, while Nokul just stands and watches with no idea what it even is. After a moment of intense concentration, she announces she has their exact position. Pausing and emphasizing each word, she confidently proclaims exactly where they need to head. Nokul doesn't even take his eyes off her finger, and there, essentially, is nothing, just empty ocean. Neither he nor Aspie sees anything, but Genius calmly assures them everything is fine. Then she moves into self-praise, saying she is a sea genius. Funny, considering she is the queen of seasickness. A little later, Zinniaz ties her hair and shows she has cat ears and a tail, and it looks like a novelty. As soon as the phone rang outside, she rushed to the receiver and quickly said she was ready for the next step of their journey. Noel excitedly calls her to the deck. He wants to show something right now. He waved his hand toward the distant island and clarified if it was the same Marine Academy she had mentioned. She grabs the spyglass and her eyes light up as she confirms, yes, that's exactly it. Through her lens, we see Marine Island, their dream destination, finally emerging on the horizon. Genius suddenly drops a bomb. The island is actually his hometown. The name Marine Island is well known to Nokul. He tries to figure out where he has heard it before. She just waves it off and says it's okay if he never recognizes the name. They say it was once the main hub for both the fleet and pirates, but now only a small village remains. Nokul is completely exhausted by the very thought that the fleet and pirates share one base and even retell a strange story. He asks to borrow her spyglass for a closer look, and she hands it to him without hesitation. What he sees is a port full of military ships, and Aspie moment by moment is overwhelmed by panic. They will definitely be discovered. Genius, already with full cat ears, points to the old, abandoned port. That's where they will land unnoticed. With the plan in hand, they set off. Majestic floating sailhomes fly to the island, preparing a hidden approach. Reaching the shaky pier, the crew finally steps onto solid ground after a long journey. Noelle breathes out with great relief, happy that they reach the shore alive and unharmed. Her face simply glows as she thanks him for bringing her back home. She is so grateful that she even takes off her hat for a solemn, sincere bow of thanks. Our guy pretends indifference, winks and says he was glad to help you, with the trash. But suddenly Murmursig's expression becomes icy. Her senses catch something nearby. Pointing with her wing at the crates, she signals Noelle, someone is hiding there. Genius calls the hidden one, and a shadowy figure peeks out from behind the crates. The girl hiding nervously shudders, young and clearly did not expect to be found. In Knuckles' head, the worst scenario immediately flashes. The fleet has already captured them. One boot steps out of the shadow, momentarily building tension, and the main revelation is the child, who looks more frightened by them than anything else. He and the quiet cigar freeze in surprise. This is definitely not a high-ranking fleet officer. A closer look at her bandana and the skull with crossed bones immediately catches the eye. This is not worn as standard naval attire. But Genius, however, recognizes her at first glance and pierces the air with a scream, "Natham." The girl's face lights up with joy, and she bursts into a dead sprint straight towards her. She throws herself into Genius's arms for a tearful, joyful reunion, strong as an escape from separation. Just watches everything unfold and makes a brilliant conclusion: they might be acquainted. Nat M explains that she has been waiting all this time for Genius to finally come home. Genius sits on the head and apologizes for being gone so long, and Nat M only wants even more lessons from the ship. After that, she introduces the team and tells Nat M, these are the people thanks to whom her return became possible. This child solemnly introduces himself, Natum, from the pirate village Pirate Village. Our guy Nokul calls out his full absurdly official name and even smiles so charmingly that you want to believe it. Natum immediately asks if he is really a friend of Genius, especially considering that he is a wanted great sinner. While Nokul causes a small disruption, Nathan simply showers with admiration and gushes about how long she has been endlessly fascinated by Genius. Jinna instantly presses her palm to her mouth before she can reveal the secret about her chronic seasickness. To change the subject, she indulgently invites the entire crew to her village as a thank you. Our guy waves his hand dismissively. The offer is not bad, but if the Navy intercepts them, it will be a disaster. She reassures him the academy is somewhat isolated, but she is almost certain she can vouch for them hand in hand before the villagers. Here SB's eyes light up as soon as she hears that near the village there is plenty of old ship junk. The word garbage activates Nokul. He grabs Genius and pulls him further, insisting that his skills will be very useful. He proclaims with full enthusiasm that this is the best possible greeting, and Jinna looks simply stunned. With a triumphant yell, Nokul rushes forward straight into the forest, leaving the others to catch up. The whole quirky team sets off along the forest path straight to the village. Noel turns to Aspie and asks if she is uneasy about following them. But suddenly he is tied up and surrounded by pirates with blunted blades, asking if he is bait for pirate healers. Murmursig watches this chaos and, without changing his tone, calmly states he does not consider a genius to be someone capable of setting traps. Our guy looks back at the path and for the first time, genuine concern appears on his face. He demands that Ginny explain where she got such certainty, and Murmursig simply, without unnecessary words, explains. Her intuition prompted her. Then she invades Ginny's personal space and quietly adds that it all comes down to the scent of a person. This is followed by a loud, relentless greeting with the nose right to Genius's neck. Completely ordinary, by no means creepy. Murmursig clarifies, Genius does not smell of hostility, so everything is fine, guys. Nokul is completely confused and blurts out, what the hell is this smell of hostility supposed to mean? We are quickly taught a lesson. Harpies literally sense people's magic and hostile intentions as well. Our guy immediately puts the puzzle together. That's exactly how she sensed Natum catching the hostility carried by those pirates hiding nearby. Suddenly, Natum grabs his hand and tries to stop him, not letting him jump to conclusions. This child insists, even if some of the pirates are wicked, the people in her village are completely different. With a very serious face, she begs him to believe her and swears that they are not villains. It seems her village follows the code of Father Genius, a pirate in the style of Robin Hood, who helped the poor. She even points to his statue and says that he explained, being a pirate is more than just stealing. Noel is completely sold, his cheeks burn. He blushes like a boy who just met the daughter of his idol. He sharply turns to Ginny and almost chokes on his words, telling what a legend her father was. But then he notices Genius has fallen face down and Murmursig has disappeared. Genius explains from the ground how Murmursig flew away after sniffing a strange smell. Our guy is simply confused. He talks about that strange smell as if it should explain something. Suddenly Murmursig swoops down from the sky and dives down, roaring the name Nokul. She lands in panic and with a trembling voice says that something very serious has happened. He turns sharply, completely bewildered, because she taps him on the shoulder to get his attention. She points to the village and there is now a raging hell, a bad sign that foretells nothing good. Genius and Nadim are completely shocked. It dawns on them that their entire home is burning. This child is simply trembling, unable to think about anything, and not even able to grasp what is happening right before her. Nokal immediately switches to leader mode and gives the order, everyone move out immediately. The entire crew finally moves as one and flies like an arrow through the thickets, rushing at full speed to where smoke rises and flames flare up. They rush along the path, and the glow of the fire becomes brighter with every step. On Genius's face is pure horror, and forcing herself to run even faster, she rushes forward. But just as they are about to break out of the trees, she throws out her hand to stop Nokal. She points to the entrance to the village. There stretches a chain of figures holding guard. This is the fleet, and they are just watching as everything is consumed by flames, not lifting a finger. Murmurzig understands everything. They did not come to save, they are only blocking this section. In fact, she feels their hostility. She suspects that they were the ones who set the fire. Genius completely loses control. He shouts that Navy broke their neutrality pact. So far, Nadim only whispers to her parents she is terrified for them. Nokal carefully places his hand on her shoulder and tries to hold her so she doesn't fall apart like gunpowder. He tries to calm her down and says that everything will be fine. So through the front gates of Ogo, our guy enters into contemplation and draws up a new attack plan. And then an idea comes to him. They can enter directly from the sky. Genius's eyes light up. If Murmurzig guides them, then they can completely bypass the fleet. He asks if she can handle the weight and she casually agrees, ready for human air transport. Murmurzig casts a look, pure, undiluted concentration. Time to act. And she flew into the air carrying the entire crew on herself, like an extremely clumsy person screaming like a kite. Genius is already grumbling that her head will be torn off any moment now, and that's it. No quiet landing from height. They land amid complete chaos. The sea archers are simply shooting arrows into the crowd. One soldier calmly makes a notch on a flaming arrow and does not move from his place while civilians run, saving their lives. A little boy kneels and sobs, and around him is a bloody meat grinder after the attack. A flawlessly white boot step by step cuts into the frame, showing no respect for the dead. From behind, some naval officer casually nods, as if to say how beautifully it burns here, while his subordinate salutes. Meet Colonel Vasha, the uncle with a nose that could become a weapon, declaring, "All pirates are trash." With a truly wicked grin, he orders his men, just keep setting everything on fire indiscriminately. Then this psycho organizes a pop quiz and asks the frightened villagers which captain is the most respected. His soldiers immediately start shouting his name, sometimes showing scared obedience, sometimes simply out of pure fear. And then Washer asks who is the strongest man at sea, clearly enjoying the sound of his own name. His men raise a shout with his name again, and he responds with that confident, self-satisfied smile that only a strike can conveniently give. His face betrays him as soon as he looks at the crying boy, and he cuts in with one phrase, "Wrong." The boy lifts his head and stubbornly tells the colonel that he is not the strongest at all. Through tears streaming down his cheeks, he wheezes, "The strongest is a man named Francis." For a moment, the legendary pirate Francis flashes on the screen, a hero who, apparently, defended this village. So this boy orders the colonel to get lost, and on top of that calls him Big Nose, truly a fatal mistake. The people of Wash simply freeze in absolute horror. His bosses, they hit the mark perfectly. He washes his face, twists his features into a self-satisfied, eerily chilling smile. It's clear he likes this petty show of power. He nods to his subordinate, an archer, who looks as if he just swallowed a bug. And the order is, burn the child along with the rest of this trash because, of course, that's how it should be. The poor boy is completely frozen with fear. He stands still as if the worst is about to happen. This archer only stammers he is overwhelmed by the order to injure the child, and he is completely confused. He even tries to object, points with his finger and says that their target is, well, literally a child. Washa immediately grabs him by the collar. It's clear that disobedience is definitely not to his liking. With ice in his gaze, he asks why someone hesitates when it comes to cleaning up the trash. The face of this soldier simply screams, "I made a terrible career choice." Then Washer stomps on the pirate flag and roars about how heroes like Francis drive him mad. He shakes the poor guy, shouting that all pirates are dangerous without exception. This soldier tries to plead for the child's life, but his words break and choke. After that, a threat sounds. Your family asks if the soldier and his family are also trash. He doesn't quite get the nuances. And so the soldier's back completely dissolves, as if fear turned into a puddle. He pulls out a flaming arrow and will beg for his family to be spared, obediently carrying out the terrible order. His hand trembles so wildly that it's a miracle he can hold the bow steady at all. Having no other choice, he shoots the burning arrow straight at the boy. Wash's smile is pure hellish evil. He gets exactly what he wanted. This boy can only watch in horror as the arrow wildly howls and rushes straight at him. The reflection in his pupil shows the soldier who fired is already running away. And exactly at the last second, a flash of light intercepts the arrow right in flight and it dissolves in the glow. And Nakal is kneeling before the boy, covering him, and in his hand a glowing ring. His skill instantly nullifies the blazing arrow, only powder remains. Clean his face, a perfect picture of what just happened, something so intense you can't even grasp it. Our guy stands up. Now he stands between the child and the stunned naval officers. Behind him, the child raises his gaze and freezes in delight. Being a pirate or not absolutely doesn't matter. Nakal's gaze sharpens no matter what excuse is given. Attacking a defenseless child is unthinkable. Forming a fiery halo, he extends the ring and declares that they are the real trash here. Your man takes a drag from his cigar and, squinting sharply, asks, "Who is this nobody if he is clearly not local?" Our guy just stared at him, not the least bit embarrassed by any military posturing. His face is icy. He confidently thinks that this chatterbox has no idea who he is talking to, a prince. This colonel points out that this very newcomer has just broken the attack of his soldiers, stopping it with a self-satisfied smile. Washa asks in surprise whether our guy can handle an entire squad and orders them all to aim. Noko's eyes narrow. He clearly does not intend to retreat from this fight. With a sharp movement, he simply kicks up and a huge pile of burning wooden planks flies in all directions. He quickly apologizes to the guy for borrowing his house, then raises the ring to activate his technique. Washa simply shouts orders to his people and they release arrows. A whole volley of arrows whistling through the air flies straight at Noko and all the junk near where he stands. His hand flashes as soon as he activates the skill, ready to repel the entire attack without hesitation. And his skill is recycle. All broken wood flies upward and forms a huge shield. This arrow just dulls into the temporary wooden wall and not once even comes close. Nakal's recycling skill turns the entire house into a perfect air penetration combat barricade. Washa and his thugs freeze in place, completely baffled. Their attack yielded no results. Behind the wall, the child and mother can only freeze in amazement. Their home literally keeps them alive. But Nokal is not finished yet. He stretches out his hand, ready to turn this defense into a brutal offense. Suddenly, some petty junk, random, very ordinary, catches the air and starts flying with a quite tangible purpose. All this trash clings together, forming a huge, angry-looking fist and heads straight towards Navy. The soldiers shudder and raise their eyes in pure horror. Their punishment, made of furniture, collapses on them. It is something that continuously grows into a giant hand, and Nokal cuts them off. The game time is officially over. To the hum and whistle of his own canonicity, our guy swings the junk column with a gigantic hand and strikes directly at the enemy line. Washa tries to stop the incoming trash-avalanche with bare hands, a brave strategy we will see if she holds. And we catch a majestic shot. His face contorts in pure, flawless panic horror. This dirty fist flies down with incredible force, and the soldiers scatter in different directions like bowling pins. His people are thoroughly beaten with barrels and boards to a disgraceful, humiliating defeat. And this boy just sits in place, stunned by the silence, frozen in the immobilized chaos unfolding right before him. Washa, now completely lost control, shouting to his people to put all their strength and kill Noko. One soldier, too brave, or rather too foolish, still rushes forward with his sword ready to carry out that crazy order. He doesn't even manage to get close. He is immediately thrown into the air, and with a thud, his face crashes into the ground. That soldier still shudders on the ground, a clear warning to anyone who dares to bring anything too clever to mind. At that very moment, backup bursts in, and Jinya, together with Murmur Sig, land right in the middle of the melee. Genius sits in the center of the slaughter and demands an explanation. What the hell, damn it, is going on here? The deceased recognizes her as the daughter of the legendary pirate and completely loses control because of the harpy. He rushes sharply to Washa and presses one point. They cannot fight the harpy and must immediately execute a strategic retreat. The tobacco in Wash's cigar just plops out of his mouth and not a trace remains of his tough guy. He demonstratively gives the order for a full retreat while at the same time promising he will not forget this little trick. And the naval force, as if on command, turns around and flees, as if under fire, all the way to the hills. This peasant, noticing how their caddies are fleeing, bursts into joyful cries towards the unexpected rescuers. Nokul simply shakes the dust off his hands and says indifferently that everything has finally been settled. Jinniz could not find peace from anxiety. The fleet had already seen his face, but Noko immediately notices he had no idea that he was even a prince. With a smile, he raises his thumb and declares, "Everything is fine." The Navy would not recognize him from the days when he was scrapping from his dumpster. As soon as the immediate threat receded, Nokul solemnly announces, "It is time to start helping the peasants rebuild." And here Genius simply stares at him, intently wide-open eyes, completely starstruck. But at that very moment, Nokle is suddenly overwhelmed by a wave of dizziness. He suddenly falls to his knees and grabs his head, and Genius shouts his name piercingly. Our guy is completely thrown off track and cannot understand why his body suddenly became heavy as a stone and exhausted to the bone. Jinniz and Natum immediately understand everything. This is the backlash from his skill, the moment that had to come. Natem explains that creating that huge junkarm must have burned an incredible amount of energy. Nokul tries to get up, insists that he is fine, and assures he just needs a short rest. When the crew turns around to help, the back of a woman in a floral bandana emerges towards them. And suddenly they find themselves face to face with a crowd of peasants. They look as if they are not thankful at all. Their leader of the settlers points confidently at Nokul, as if he were the executed Prince Alkines, so there can be no talk of a low profile anymore. Genius and Natum immediately panic. They try at all costs to prove that he is not bad, but instead of a fight, a huge feast suddenly rolls out on the table. Well, another plot twist. It turns out that the angry mob was just a welcoming party, and now they are calling the team village saviors. Nokul is completely confused. He could not understand why they are so kind to the fugitive they are searching for. The peasant explains, supposedly, he not only beat Washa with his skill, he rebuilt their city from scratch. Accompanying this with explosive laughter, the guy, in a tone that tolerates no objections, declares that he owes his life to Nokul and orders, "So eat already." After a short pause, our guy still weighs it seriously and finally gets down to business. He accepts their hospitality. The whole company approaches Nokul and immediately starts eating because he admits, eating on solid ground is really a pleasant change. Even Murmur, Sig, and Genius happily stuff their mouths. The previous danger has completely evaporated. They no longer think about it. Genius politely thanks the man for sharing such valuable food with them. One single word catches Noko's attention. He immediately understands everything. There is hunger in the village now. We again capture a frame with the legendary pirate Francis Dam. He clearly had a weakness for children. For now, Jinna simply carefree, suspects nothing, enjoying her food without any worries. Nokul aloud pronounces the name Francis and puts together everything the boy just told from the tale. With excitement, that little one who was there before emerges. He asks if the prince knows his hero. He explains Francisco freed him from slavery and brought all the orphans here so they could become one family. Then a bombshell drops. Some villager, as if casually, says that the great pirate Francis is actually Jinna's father. Natham looks worried and quietly says she heard. Francis disappeared some time ago. But suddenly the room becomes oppressive. The villagers cast glances at the fates. The official celebration is over. The leading villager begins to explain and solemnly says, since everything began, a lot of time has passed. It turned out Francis once sailed away to catch a wave and talk a little with the king of the Alkins. Nokul is completely unsettled. He does not understand why the pirate would even meet with his father. Before disappearing, Francis seemed to try to save the island from a truly serious problem. Natum lifted the rotten core of the apple and explained that he was going to remove the trash from the island. Only he has such a wonder. As soon as he puts together the trash and the lack of food, his face simply falls off. These local fish eat toxic magical fragments and poison everyone who dares to taste Thema real 5-star banquet. And since the islanders themselves could not cope with it, Francis went to the kingdom for help. Nokul finally reaches the truth. This magical poison is the real cause of hunger in the village. While her father's mission is not yet completed, Jinna stands. Yupan looks as if she is already ready to take everything under control. Her hand clenches with determination, and she carries out her intention without unnecessary hesitation. She freezes in a stance and swears to protect everyone from both trash and villains, and dies heroically, extraordinarily bravely. This peasant woman simply explodes with energy. Her statements that she is becoming their new protector are enough to set everything on fire. She is already being called the next captain, and the whole room is boiling with pure hype. Noelle just watches, smiles proudly, and rejoices. She is happy to see her finding her purpose. Then he turns to Jin and catches her attention with a simple call of her name. With a serious face, he tells her that he is finally beginning to understand why her father is so respected here. In fact, he is so inspired that he leans forward and impatiently asks for more stories about the legendary pirate. Genius freezes for a moment in amazement, and then a wide, happy smile spreads across her face. Somewhere from afar across the room, she nods joyfully, yes, ready to tell her father all the stories. Meanwhile, at what looks like a completely official naval base, someone is about to receive a report that will spread rage everywhere. And then someone is absolutely furious, pounding their fist on the table with all their might, making a deafening crack. This new official with a truly sinister nose shouts that some trash dared to humiliate him. When Francis is no longer there, he frantically insists that this is the perfect chance to finally destroy the entire village to the last. His subordinate timidly suggests they need a real plan how to resist the harpy and this mysterious skill user. Our long-nosed villain grits his teeth. He is boiling with rage because Jin dragged unnecessary companions to the banquet. He literally burns with anger, unable to comprehend how she managed to tame a whole pack of monsters and how she inherited leadership skills from her father. Another soldier smiles indulgently, as if to say you expected nothing else from Francis's daughter, and his colleague looks frightened at the same time. For that small remark and immediately a fist right in the face, bon appetit. The tall official himself rushed into the attack, his fist already bloody, and he, grinding his eyes, looks down on the unruly thug. He cannot hold back for long. With a furious scream, he reprimands his subordinate for daring to praise the enemy right in front of him. Then he quickly flies up and kicks the fallen soldier, clearly a fervent supporter of positive reinforcement. Lud spits on his exquisite metal, whining that the trash is incapable of understanding his glorious achievements. With a face twisted by pure mad rage, he shouts that there is no place left in this world for their kind. Returning to the village, we fix our gaze on one window that is lit, and the night immediately becomes quiet, almost obedient. Inside, Nokul takes a break and thinks, today everything has definitely started for real. Suddenly it becomes clear to him, Francis's unfinished business is exactly the same as his own dream. He glanced at the ring and immediately guessed, with the new appointment, Genius will most likely remain on his raft. At that very moment, the silhouette of a girl with cat ears appears on his doorstep. The screeching violin of the door opens and Nadim steps outside, but he calls, "Your name." Our guy was clearly expecting a genius. No. Nokul casually asks what happened, barely surprised by her late-night visit. His eyes barely widen as he puts together the unexpected situation. Nadim apologizes, saying she just wanted to see him, and nervously adds that there is something important she wants to talk to him about. With a trembling look, she asks if she can come into his room for a minute. Our guy, though a gentleman, happily invites her inside and offers his roof since there are no chairs. She politely thanks him and sits right on the edge of the mattress. Sitting on it, Nokul cannot help but notice, today she has a completely different, more mature mood. Then she moves a little closer to him on the bed. But Nolkisniski pulls her. Nokul just snaps, creaks backward, jumps up in panic, and growls an apology. Simple, but you, pretty smooth, friend. He tries to pull himself together, asks her to calm down and just say what's on her mind. Natham says it's serious. She came because there is something she has to tell him personally. He does not understand why this concerns only him, but she insists. She does not want to bother the other villagers. A full moon hangs high in the sky, and its light sets a gloomy tone for this secret meeting. She finally reveals to him her goal, the real reason why she was thrown overboard and caught in a sea accident. We dive into a memory. A much younger Nadim calls his father. Her father, a large, friendly-looking pirate, turns around and asks what is wrong with her. She asks if he is going to play righteous pirate again by order from the Navy. And he just laughs in response and says that they are like cats. They help people because they decided so themselves. And we see their pirate flag, a cute but stubborn cat face, stubbornly proving the right is on his side. Their father proudly calls them sea cat pirates, a crew that lives by its own heart. The very young Nadim simply shines, completely enchanted by all this romance of adventure. Sitting on his shoulders, she shouts that she will definitely become a pirate as soon as she grows up. He carefully takes her down from his shoulders, and for a moment her excitement freezes. Kneeling down, he says to her it's not that simple. Then he smiles and adds that she is his daughter. With a proud smile, he strokes her head, promising, someday she will definitely become the heavenly queen. At that moment, the naval officer calls Francis and he immediately gets up, ready to go. She asks him why he is heading to the Golden Lynx instead of their own ship. Francis explains the kingdom hates pirates, so joining the castle is his only chance along with the fleet. Waving goodbye, he entrusts Jinya to take care of the sea cats until he returns. The memory comes to an end and we are again in the present silence, in a room bathed in moonlight. Nadim tells Nokul that was the last time she saw her father alive. Shortly after he disappeared, Vasya and a whole group of officials arrived in the village with grim news. It was a long-nosed official herald who proclaimed, Francis is dead, and ordered the sea cats to be disbanded. This elder executor from the community is simply furious, demanding an explanation for why they are doing this. This scoundrel with a smug smile explains, their ship originally belonged to the kingdom, so they are just reclaiming it. But the peasant stubbornly insists that Francis has a daughter, Jinya, and she is to become the rightful heir. She immediately cuts him off, laughs at him, lies to his face, and completely dismisses the idea that a child could inherit anything. A dirty thought begins to form in his head as he taps his pipe, and the thought spins, what if? Then he proposes a twisted deal. Genius will get the ship if he obtains a privateer license at the Naval Academy. The village leader grabs the young genius and rages wildly because she is sure the child will get the ship. And our long-nosed villain intervenes, arrogantly ringing that she was just unlucky. With a joyful smile, he explains, the academy is a 4-year program, so the ship will be gone before her 2nd year. In his thoughts, there was no chance that she would make it in time. But Jinya simply clenches her father's hat, her face like a mask, pure, unwavering determination. Despite all odds, she still enrolled in the Naval Academy, ready to prove they were all wrong. She stands there and, without a doubt, looks like an outsider among the other cadets who do nothing but stare. Her new goal is to finish her studies in 2 years, and everyone thinks that is simply impossible. And the students meanwhile simply mock her ambitions. They throw trash at her while she studies. Even her books are covered with cute inscriptions like "See trash, go away." Despite the bullying, she holds on to the thought, the probability is not 0, there is still a chance. She throws herself into ruthless physical training, squeezing everything out of her body to the absolute limit. And it works. Her name jumps to the top rung in the class ranking, shocking everyone. This incredible demonstration immediately catches the eye of a high-ranking naval admiral, a very decorated old man. He explains, for exceptional individuals there already exists a system that allows skipping classes, so he makes the final decision at his own discretion. And with a refined gesture, he pushes Genius directly from Class 2 to Class 4, causing the villain to tremble and shudder. Our long-legged extortionate scoundrel can only sweat and silently nod. He dares not argue with the big boss. Genius accepts the promotion, tears already welling up, and with a trembling voice, thanks the admiral for the given opportunity. Even if Vasha clearly hates her, he has no power to cancel the final decision of the naval admiral. Thanks to this elevated position, she managed in 2 years, right up to the deadline, to pass the graduation exam, a simulation of a naval battle. This was a test sparring in the 1-on-1 format. Victory went to the one who would use special magic to put a full stop on the opponent's ship. And it all ended in complete fiasco, mainly because Jinya was incredibly strong seasickness. She returns to the dock completely broken, frankly admitting that she couldn't do a single thing there. The fleet admiral tells her it's a real pity because everything in her is perfect except practical skills. But as Francis's daughter, she gets a special concession. He hints that she should try again, but on another ship. In the background, Washa only grits his teeth, furious over the open affection that is not hidden. For her second shot, Jinya decides to take the exam on her father's ship, Sea Cat. She even puts on her father's old pirate costume, hoping to steal at least a bit of his courage for the fight. Burning with fire in her eyes, Jinya thinks that this might finally give her the confidence she lacks. But the cadets assigned to her by order are already grumbling, get off the ship before the battle has even started. The shameless scoundrels call her sea trash and poke as if the lieutenant colonel ordered them not to help her. Jinnah, in despair, rushed forward, begging them to just wait a moment. She is unable to launch the huge ship on her own, so they just row away, leaving her all alone stranded on the shoal. And in a moment, the enemy ship responds with fire, but those shots do not look like training at all. A continuous downpour of real cannonballs flies over her, howling and rushing straight at her vessel. The cannonballs hit the side, tearing the deck to pieces, and real explosions rip everything around. She throws Genius over the deck because her father's legacy is already being torn to shreds. A massive crack runs through the entire ship and simply tears it apart, even shreds it. On land, she realizes this is not immortal magic for a test, this is a real assault in battle. And from the second ship, one of the cadets just watches as the destruction unfolds right before his eyes. The lead cadet frantically communicates over the radio on the enemy ship and urgently reports to Washa, demanding new orders. He reports that they managed to isolate the Genius, but honestly admits, actually hitting her turns out to be too difficult. Washa tells him only to report that it happened as an accident, and then send skeletons to finish her off. With a face that only a mother could hate, he disgustedly grabs for words and declares that the sea trash deserves a proper burial. The subordinate did not waste time and immediately reported the order: prepare the skeletons for launch. And by launch, they literally meant catapult the barrels onto her deck, because why not? This barrel crashed and fell right next to Jinya, and she was completely thrown off course by this bizarre attack. She tries to understand what is happening while the ship is covered with gifts from hell. Suddenly one of the barrels cracks and splits from the inside. A bony hand pierces the wood through, and here is the surprise. Someone is killed inside the box. An armored skeleton climbs out and stands before the completely stunned Genius. It turns out Vasha sent a whole company of these bony thugs to make everything as thorough as possible, and without any gaps. Genius finally gets completely terrified. Now he understands this was not any kind of test. One of them lunged forward with a sword, and she barely managed to dodge so the blow did not hit her. Cornered and wounded, she desperately rushes to the captain's cabin. She barely manages to slam the heavy door and close it behind her. Inside, everything tightens with pain. The whole room trembles as the ship continues to tear apart. She clenches her leg and realizes she was wounded deeper than she thought during that last dodge. Her consciousness begins to fade, blood loss and shock are taking their toll, and in the present, Nat M explains, it was then that she fainted just before Noel found her, washed ashore in the sea. As he listens to her story, Noel's fist clenches so tightly that the whole bed shakes. He is simply torn apart by rage, and Jinya jerks back, completely stunned by his reaction. Only one thought remains in his mind: scumbag Washa was totally okay with dying. Genius quickly tries to calm him down, apologizing for dumping all this on him, but Noel's expression of pure rage shifts into cold, steel determination. He looks her in the eyes and asks what she wants to do now. She has a license, right? Her cat-like eyes narrow, the fire in them whispers, absolutely not. Staring out the window, she swears she cannot give up, neither on her father's dreams nor her own. Nokul softly tells her that to revive the sea lions, she will have to confess everything, but this trauma hits her hard in the horror that she will be abandoned again and called sea garbage. And our guy just laughs and shows, look, garbage, and of course that's exactly how it turns out. Genius stands there simply baffled by his oddly joyful response. He looks at her and says that now she is not alone, she has friends. She still hesitated, a bitter thought gnaws at her: what if she loses the next mock battle? Nokul raises the shining artifact and, without blinking, promises Genius will rework it so that something incredible comes out. She is filled with amazingly sincere support but cannot hold back, breaks into sobs, and this relief finally comes. He felt that he was already, finally felt. And behind the door, the harpy and the boy keenly caught every word, eavesdropping, not missing a single detail. The sun rises over the island and the day starts anew, just as non-stop as the plan that is already taking shape. Beyond all this another world, breakfast is already on the table and someone calls Nokul over the fried fish. The mermaid girl looks intently, where is Jinya, and holds a fish on a stick, and above all thinks about people. This mermaid and Genius grab the prey and gnaw the fish, trying to understand where Nokul disappeared. Speak of the devil, and Jin already notices him. He is walking up the path together with a very gloomy local. Nokul, with feverish cheerfulness, tells that he found this guy at the dump and does it in a way that annoys the man. Holding his own fried fish, he says he got hungry and caught it right here in the bay. This throws the local into complete panic shock. He screams wildly, his head spinning. He grabs Nokul and tries to forcibly make him spit it out, shouting that the local fish is contaminated. Our guy looks only a little bored, but he just raises his hand to stop him. Nokul, with a confident smile, explains that actually he quite normally eats poisoned food. Both the genius and the local can only freeze their brains, cannot put this phrase together. The flashback reveals his hidden prince days when he grew curious and reached for the poisonous fish living outside the castle. His first taste test naturally ended with him nearly dying, lying on the ground, and that, they say, was a solid scientific method. So he just kept eating it non-stop, simultaneously developing antidotes and building immunity through pure, insanely reckless self-poisoning. And now he proudly stands against this, and his new friends look as if their souls have just left their bodies. That mermaid and that turtle boy are practically begging everyone, do not try this at home because this is real madness. Genius, ever the professional, interrupts the conversation and asks how his plan actually went. The scene shifts to another corner. She stands in the office and, as officially as possible, reports to the official. Of course, this is your mocking of her absolutely insane demand to replay the fight simulation once more. Poorly hiding a smile, he informs her that he has already reported about her to the fleet admiral, so he was only a little late. But suddenly, a nasty thought bites into his head, and he begins to seemingly review the options. Vasker agrees to the recheck, and the genius thanks him with such deep sincerity, and neither of them even suspected that this was just another trap. Washa, of course, adds one more condition to his generous offer. This deal is simple. If she loses this time, the military will confiscate all her father's property. He boasts that only the worthy have the right to such wealth, not some loser who couldn't even pass the test. And if she refuses, he casually hints that another disaster might happen to her settlement, pure blackmail. Without any other choice, Genius quietly agrees and fully, wholeheartedly accepts the conditions, cut off, trapped. Returning to her friends, she clenches her fists and announces, the rematch is officially on. Her main trouble now is simple and terrible. Her father's ship has disappeared, so she is afraid to board a replacement vessel. But Nokul only smiles. He is holding a turtle boy, and behind him a harpy materializes from the air, and he already has a plan. He suddenly grabs her by the wrist, and it seems he is about to pull her into his next brilliant, probably crazy idea. And with his come on, he drags along a very confused genius. The whole team follows him through the forest, keeping course toward his secret project. Nokul points dramatically into the distance, ordering her to just look. Her eyes widen sharply, full disbelief at what she sees. Because right at the pier is moored a huge pirate ship, with full rigging. It looks as if it is about to go into battle. Genius can only stumble, naming his own name and golden chains, and Nokul simply shines as if nothing happened. He explains, since they needed a pirate ship, he took and assembled it from a raft and disassembled and laid out all the parts just like that, by the way. Despite the incredible gift, Genius still peeks out from behind the mast, too obviously, scared to death. She turns to Nokul, and her voice trembles with doubt as she begins to admit her greatest fear. Even on this impressive ship, her seasickness still knocks her off her feet, pressing her against the back. She is grateful but thinks in horror, could this new ship also be destroyed again and the trauma catch up with her again? As soon as she starts to be wildly rocked and lose balance, someone calls her from the local dump. And then the whole village, dressed, gathered, and ready for battle. Genius stands as if stunned and asks why they are all here. This harpy casually admits that she overheard her snotty confession last night. Privacy is just a hint. Nadham explains, as soon as she heard that she was reviving pirates, they raised everyone together to help. This local guy sees Vash's plan through, to steal her wealth and smash the village. Nozzle, holding the baby turtle close, just smiles and says that this is their counterplan. Then he strikes a pose and declares that they are her team for the show fight. Genius' brain just completely shuts down. He is unable to process such a level of chaotic support. In a moment, the shock finally reaches her, and she completely loses control. She grabs Nokul and frantically explains that the team has already been assigned by Washa himself. And the local just throws a thumbs-up sign from the booth where Washa's team is tied up and dozing. Genius hesitated again, but turned her exhausting seasickness inside out one last time. But this turtle boy appears and tells her there is nothing to worry about. He explains that they used magic to stabilize the entire ship, so it wouldn't rock even an inch. She looks around, and only now it dawns on her. The deck beneath her feet stands as if rooted, absolutely motionless. Turning back to the locals, she declares that they all just do whatever they want. He just smiles crookedly, says that's how it is among sea cats, and hands her the captain's hat. Her hand slowly reaches forward and touches the familiar cat in the crossbone emblem. Overwhelmed with emotions, she finally turns back to Nokul, ready to accept their crazy, amazing help. Pressing the hat to her chest, she thanks them through tears for everything. Nokul, with his entire gang behind him, turns up the heat on her, cursing the victory. Pulling on the hat, she fully embraces her role as captain of this clumsy team. Holding her fist high, she declares that she will borrow their strength for this fight. The whole village erupts in applause, officially christening the new brilliant pirate crew. The scene switches. Nokul on a raft has just crafted new clothes for a baby turtle. Nadim decides to become humanoid to try on the new garments. She proceeds to complete the transformation so that the girl fully sprawls on the wild, very, very frightened Nokul. He wakes up on the pier all embarrassed and hoping it was just some strange dream. Meanwhile, the harpy boasts about the berries she grew and assures there is no need to worry about food anymore. It turns out these magical berries also work as soap, extremely convenient indeed. Nadim explains that once the islanders used all kinds of strange fruits to cleanse themselves of trash and dirt. As it turned out, this escalated into a full-fledged cult of worshipping trash, and Nokul was completely thrown off track. But thanks to all the new resources, they can finally filter water and cook proper food. This harpy cannot understand, why does he clean up the materials every time if they will have to start using them again very soon anyway? He is already stalling for time with explanations, but a flock of ragged crow cries hovers above and suddenly swoops down, pulling everything that falls into their beak's reach. He is crying. Nokul, between sobs, explains, wild birds constantly steal his supplies to build nests, so the fight is not just for show, it's real. His next project is a magically charged grill, but he honestly admits, looking through disappointment, he doesn't have the juice to power it. This terrifying harpy admits that she also doesn't know how to use magic, and Nadim simply says, "Stop." Nadim speaks like an old sailor. He has no idea how these modern magical devices work. Nadim explains, some savage with magic caused a massacre, that's why the islanders lost their faith. When everything was finally decided, Nokul announces that they are all boarding the ship to launch the magical cannon. This turtle boy immediately doubts, is a giant cannon really necessary, and prays that they won't have to use it. And the harpy insists they need serious firepower because no one can guarantee a safe journey. All this triggers a memory of how Nokul runs away from giant monsters. For him, it's just another Tuesday. Meanwhile, on the main island, Genius officially returned to finally file her report. Washa, ever the creep, peeks out the window and chats, checking what exactly she had to hear about her request for a rematch. The high-ranking admiral grants the request but immediately gives an order. If she fails this time, she will be erased forever. The subordinate bows and leaves, promising to bring the final test results. The finger squeezes the device and it clicks with a creepy inevitability, locking in place. And Washa simply radiates pure villain energy, convinced that no sea trash will get through. He surveys his luxurious office, already counting the fortune that is about to be recovered. But as soon as he began his villainous monologue, a soldier burst into the room with a crash, and everything instantly went awry. This soldier looks frightened and reports in a trembling voice, the entire Genius team has been mysteriously replaced. This news completely fries your brain in shock. Your hand drops the pen cap from your fingers. Now to the docks. There, a massive golden lynx is already waiting, fully ready for battle. On the deck, the pocket watch ticks eerily and shows only one thing. Only moments remain until the tests start. Kreisai shouts her name, and with this exclamation makes it clear that the moment has finally come. Firmly holding her hands, Jinia pulls the cloak over the new captain, and in her gaze is pure determination. She spins in place and shamelessly embraces the pirate life loudly across the whole deck. "Io, comrades, the transformation is real, no doubt." The entire crew is focused on preparing the huge pirate ship Golden Lynx for battle. The flag with a cat's skull and crossed bones proudly waves above everything around, a sign of their departure. This Jolly Roger with a fierce cat face unfolds on the ship's sails. This magical cannon is already loaded and ready to fire, an eye bullet glowing as if waiting specifically for battle. Jinia has fully immersed herself in the role of captain and, squinting through the spyglass binoculars, scans the horizon. The Navy ship, which took second place at the Academy, slowly moves into the sea's quagmire. The captain of this opponent, a stern-faced officer, does not take his eyes off the pirate ship that is already approaching. A threatening smile stirs on his lips as he awaits the inevitable future collision. He recognizes the appearance of Golden Lynx immediately, without hesitation, identifying it as the ship of Jenny. This rival captain notes the battle has finally begun and the stakes are too high. This crew is shown in the training zone. One is running and another is breathing heavily, gasping for breath in the pace. This rival captain stands on the magical cannon and is about to give orders. This magical cannon barrel is aimed at a strange spiked projectile. It is already ready to fire at any moment. This rival captain raises his hand and signals the start of the attack. The projectile from the magical cannon bang flies over the water straight to Genie's ship. This golden lynx hits the incoming projectile and it explodes once again. The next explosion almost touches the golden chains and raises a huge splash. Genius, already in his pirate captain outfit, waves his arms and shouts orders to his crew with fierce determination. The peasant at the helm grips the wheel tightly and steers the ship with sharp, focused precision. These golden chains maneuver in the water, avoiding incoming fire. This golden lynx catches the next shot. It literally tears him apart, and the wood cracks all over the deck. Their opponent is completely stunned, doesn't understand how they could even respond from such a distance. Genius calmly and without unnecessary words explains, "This is practical combat magic. Get used to it, buddy." A moment ago, Vasha completely loses control, screams that they are breaking the rules again. She stands firm and cuts off, saying she was ready for this from the moment she accepted the rematch. And everything triggers a flashback. The officer accuses her of breaking the rules in the previous test. The same officer, a woman with cat ears, now suspects that Vasha was blackmailing Jinyu all along. Her hands clench with anger as the elements of the blackmail scheme finally come together into a single picture. They return to the opponent's ship and there they are already winding up the next salvo. 3 magical cannons flare up and glow fiercely. The observer croaks and whines. The next strike is already on the way, no time to inhale or exhale. Genius's gaze narrows from intense concentration, not a trace of fear nowhere. She doesn't falter for a moment and barks the order, helmsman straight at the enemy. And the poor turtle kid is flailing in panic, as if wondering whether she really wants to set him up and fail the strike. 3 magical projectiles, flashing like lightning, cut through the water right onto the golden chains, but ours. And our girl barely smiles, and it's immediately clear. Their ship is gathering much more magical armor than it seemed at first glance. When the wind hits them in the back, she activates some magical banner on the mast. Right in front of the ship's bow, a giant magical barrier suddenly rises. Her plan is to use it in such a way as to completely neutralize the power of the incoming magical explosion. The enemy, after striking, scorched the water and its power dissipated completely before it could even touch the hull. This rival captain stands without a word, and it's still clear that she precisely calculated the strength of his attack. On deck, Jinia Taskram holds her position, and behind her, the entire misfit team is already fully wound up and ready to act. One of the peasants simply exploded from shock and, with a trembling voice, insists that she literally saw the future. The same voice from the yard additionally confirms it, saying she unquestionably called every one of their moves. And at that moment, a childhood memory triggers everything. Her foresight had saved the old team more than once, preserving their lives. He becomes completely serious when he recalls how her father Francis spoke about her gift. How she could read the sky and the sea, predicting everything by the currents. Reading the wind, clouds, and even birds, she saw what lay ahead. It turns out her father, a legendary pirate, taught her everything, both naval tactics and enemy psychology. Her strength is simply incredible situational awareness. She swallows every detail to predict the enemy's next move. It's less than 6 cents, but there is a supercomputer brain inside that runs combat simulations in real time. And now, when her seasickness has passed, she once again reveals herself as a true genius in action. Crouching, she looks through the spyglass and sees the enemies gathering forces again on their ship. She notices they are already preparing another volley, pouring magic into their cannons. Raising her hand, she orders her crew to move straight at them but to maintain high vigilance. These golden shackles are drawn alongside the enemy ship, a bold and decisive move. Her rival captain completely loses his temper, shouting at his helmsman to outmaneuver her, but Genia's is already 5 steps ahead, calmly stating that if this is a competition, then he has already lost. Suddenly, a whole compartment of massive, magically gifted oars extends from the Golden Lynx hull. And with crazy speed, they rush forward, leaving the warship far behind. In a perfect position, she raises her hand and gives the final order, guns to the starboard side, fire. This rival captain completely loses control, shouting at his crew to immediately do something. From the golden chains, a full broadside he tears with shells aimed directly at the sea ship. Those guns bite into the enemy ship's side, and splinters fly in all directions. It turned out they were shooting not with cannonballs, but with huge lumps of black paint just repainting the enemy tower. The crew celebrates the direct hit, fully trembling with happiness they really pulled it off. With a confident smile like a rolling pin, Genya orders to hold the course and press on. But the victory lasts briefly. Her eyes widen sharply in shock when she sees that everything is happening right now. On the enemy ship stands an officer with cat ears, and it turns out that all that paint just disappears. Having not a second to explain, Genya shouts to her crew, "Quickly lie down." Her order arrives exactly at the moment when the main mass of the ship jerks and crashes onto the deck with a bang. This celebrating crew member now only shouts and barely manages to dodge the falling debris. In a moment, the Golden Lynx freezes, motionlessly smoking and looking severely wounded. Again on the enemy ship, the captain fusses, frantically searching for damage reports and asking if everyone is okay. On her own deck, Genya admits without any excuses, she completely lost vigilance and fell into their trap. Meanwhile, her opponent experiences his main moment, basking in the applause of his own team. He only gave a crooked smile. He already knew she would watch his attack from the front, so from the very beginning he decided to strike from behind. His loud revelation: he installed hidden cannons on the stern, the perfect counter to her aggressive flanking maneuver. An official representative from the academy calls through the loudspeaker and says with relief that there were no casualties during the attack. The relief quickly fades, but he grimly cuts off. This is the worst possible outcome for her. Since the mast and hull of the Golden Lynx were finished off by that last volley, it was officially knocked out of the battle. When the ship is crippled, the helmsman mutters to Genya, again they are a target in enemy fire. Her team has already fallen into despair. It fights in complete chaos across the entire deck, endlessly rushing back and forth. One of the friends, trembling with panic, begs Genya to suggest what they should do next, but she only keeps sweating endlessly. Genya clenches a small ball and admits to herself, her original plan was simple: to buy time until victory. But now, since they are dead, catching water is only a matter of time. These peasants panic. They suddenly realize that they have no real cannons at all to fight back. At this very moment, the janitor confirms their weapons are actually fancy paint sprayers, completely useless now. Even the harpy can't stand it. She grabs a crew member in pure, unadulterated frustration. Cremate clenches his fist. Rage rages within it, because their situation is hopeless to the extreme. And he bursts into furious swearing, saying they need to get some kind of trash bin and use it as a weapon, anything. And it is then that Genius finds a brilliant, absolutely crazy idea: garbage. Her first assistant just silently looks back, completely baffled by her sudden mysterious flash on. On the enemy ship, the lookout bends down to the spyglass and peers in and is equally stunned by what he sees. But the crew of Genius is now panic, pushing all the broken mast rigging overboard from their ship. They are simply dumping all the heavy, scattered ironware into the sea, a bold and desperate gambit. Her rival's captain immediately understood everything. She is shedding weight to gain speed. He pressed his lips. Her new plan is simply to escape from him before the time limit expires. And it really works. The bright and golden link begins to pull away from the Navy ship. The captain calls her by name, and Genius responds with a lightning-fast, confident thumbs up. Her gaze is determined. She orders the crew to endure a little longer and keep pushing forward. Genius suddenly twitches from a strange buzzing sound coming from her hand. It is a magical communication scroll, and someone is calling her right in the middle of the battle. On the other side, her rival disdainfully asks if she likes their little chase. She stands on her own deck and gloatingly watches as her ship finally closes the distance. When the golden chains are mangled and smoking, it is only a matter of time before they are caught and intercepted. Her competitors smugly hint, supposedly she was just stalling for time because her ship is now almost useless. Genius listens silently, and a worried expression freezes on her face as he continues to speak. He simply points out the obvious: their weapon is ridiculous, so defeat is guaranteed to them 100%. It seems Your Highness ordered him to sink them, but he, it seems, decided to be generous enough not to kill trash. Grand offer: surrender now, abandon the ship, and he will mercifully allow them to live. Face in shadow, Genius tightly grips the communicator while letting the ultimatum pass through her. This man monologues endlessly and twitches with confidence that victory is in his pocket, and his despair is already near. But then Genius smiles crookedly and tells him, the weapon exists under the ship as well. Her rival instantly gets confused, repeats her words in complete disorder because right in their path floats all the junk they dumped earlier. It is a huge tangled ball of wood, barrels, and broken parts, a floating minefield of pure junk. One of his observers notices what they dumped has now become a gigantic, tangled obstacle. This opponent captain simply explodes, shouting that she, in his opinion, is doing exactly that with this trash. Genius leaves everything calmly and tells him, "You will soon find out exactly what it does." Then she gives the order to the gunners, "Take aim at that junk floating right under the enemy's ship." The Golden Lynx cannons fire volley after volley, shooting real trash at the floating debris. Everything falls into the water at once, causing a giant chain reaction, explosions of fragments. His opponent gets soaked from head to toe and, choking with anger, shouts that this is all just futile resistance. On the deck below, his crew simply looks up and freezes in complete confusion as the trash starts to fall. Because Genius's plan was to use the water explosion and throw fragments onto the asterisk of their ship. Suddenly, the enemy crew from all sides bombards them with flying barrels and broken boards, giving no pause. Even the captain gets it. He shouts that this is literally a rain of trash. One of his poor sailors mercilessly crushed to death by a mutant barrel that exploded with a roar from shock, and Genius does not slow down, immediately gives the order for the second series to keep up the pressure. The second salvo hits the water, and another wave of trash scatters right at them. Now their captain is kneeling and complaining that they can't even move from their spot, all because of this trash. His monologue is interrupted by a bottle flying straight into his face, a truly poetic moment, and this is F. And then it clicks in his head, she threw the mass not for speed, she dropped it for the sake of the ammo. While all this flies in chaos, someone from the Genius crew activates some magic card with an octopus in the heat of the chaos. Here's what it gives: a deck filled with unconscious sailors buried under a pile of junk. Returning to the communicator, Gina smegly reported to her opponent about the strategy of trash rule. The crew, used to defending with onboard cannons, had no idea at first that the attack could cover them from above with a solid rain. Her first assistant, thrown off rhythm by the blow, bursts out praising, like what a crazy plan came to her mind. Gina just tips her hat a little and waves it off. She just had the idea to use trash as a weapon, and even from her own gang. And her first assistant can only respond with one thing: a huge raised thumb, completely delighted with their captain. His opponent kneels, clutching the communicator in his hand, just digesting his humiliating defeat as if he ate a bucket of trash. Sitting simply in the dirt, he admits there was no way to predict such a crazy, senseless tactic. His entire crew fainted and disappeared under the junk, while he whines that he is being beaten by real sea scoundrels. With his pride shattered completely, he can't even make himself laugh at how pathetic it all is. Ginia and her first mate overheard the conversation, giving him a minute to suffer in his miserable defeat on garbage fuel, but she hadn't yet finished. Through the communicator, she points out that there is one last phrase left that he simply must say. He only clarified what she wanted. It seems he expected her to boast once again, one more time. But Genius instead thanks him for neglecting Vasha's orders and deliberately missing with his offensive magic. The gaze of this rival captain sharply widens. He has been completely exposed. She says if he had fired for real, they could have been sunk, but he deliberately aimed to maim, not to destroy. This proves he did not abandon the pride of his soldiers just to unquestioningly follow orders. Smiling, she calls him an honorable warrior and at the same time her greatest rival, a moment of pure respect. He just slams the communicator, completely baffled by her words. Holding his head, he finally realized she saw through every step he took, even his secret act of mercy. His crewmates help him to his feet, resigned to the fact that their loss means one thing: they will all be expelled from the academy. But he asks them not to worry. He says he will take the blame upon himself and report to Vasha personally. He throws down his weapon and declares that the failure to destroy the Genius is solely his responsibility. Then he grabs the white flag and insists he will be the only one expelled for this. And as soon as this happens, he raises the flag of surrender, officially ending the battle. Genius and her team can only silently freeze in shock as the white flag waves above. This rival captain, in contact with Vasya, effectively admits Ginia has just finished everything and does so as if at someone else's expense. Meanwhile, Ginia and her entire team are going crazy with joy. They are celebrating a hard-fought victory. The battle is officially over, and two ships sail side by side under the flag of truce. Her first assistant is ecstatic, pounding his fist in the air and shouting her name triumphantly. Genius was so moved to tears and modestly admitting that it was a team effort said, "This is true class." Then she casts a glance at the opponent's ship. It is standing very close, near the railings. He simply looks back calmly, accepting the inevitable as if already ready for the consequences, but his face suddenly lights up with surprise as he raises his gaze at something. He is again in contact with Vasha, and from the expression on his face it is clear, the news is bad. On the other side, Vasha coldly reminds him of the condition: lose to the pirates and you will be expelled. This rival captain is trembling. He is terrified of his commander's wrath. He tries to defend the acceptance of the conditions, but it is clear he wants to push through one more, his own. Turning away slightly, he declares, the fault is only his and only he is the captain. He begs Vashya to expel him alone, only himself, and not touch his crew. Wash's response is one rude, contemptuous word: trash, completely icy cold. This rival captain falls into a stupor as soon as Vasha says that the conversation is officially over. And then Vasha herself comes out onto the deck and declares she has changed her mind about the expulsion. His opponent can only freeze in shock and shout the rank of his commander, bewildered, unable to believe. It is then that he notices that Washer is holding a weapon and looks as if no mercy is to be expected anymore. The opponent's eyes widen sharply with horror as he realizes his asterisk is actually an asterisk and it is about to happen. As soon as everything quiets down a bit, a third giant warship approaches beside them and everything instantly becomes much worse. The rival captain is completely confused. As if frozen, he looks at his communicator and cannot believe his own eyes. On Golden Chains, Jinya and her first assistant can only watch in horror as the situation rapidly spirals out of control and intensifies right before their eyes. Because Washer's ship opened fire and the explosion tore a huge hole through his subordinate's vessel. In despair, the rival captain shouts to his team, "Jump into the sea before the ship tears them to pieces." A colossal explosion and the Navy ship disappears completely, without any mercy. Jinnah and the first assistant clung to a support, preparing for the shockwave after the sudden, fierce explosion. She shouts the name of her rival in complete horror at what she has just seen. But the first assistant points and orders to look at what is happening right now. Wash's ship cuts through the ruins, and the Golden Lynx remain the only target that has not yet disappeared. Having destroyed the previous victim, the giant ship immediately directs its attention straight at them. On the deck stands Washa himself with eyes and posture the same frantic commander, ready for the second round. Jinnah and her crew immediately recognize this is Washa's personal flagship. They are completely in trouble. Meanwhile, the rival captain clings to a piece of debris still floating on the water. He barely survived the explosion. He simply pours out bitter attacks about exile being too soft for those who have stained his hands. He points to the right at Jinya's, snaps his fingers, and declares that she will not escape. At the same time, the ship deploys a whole row of magical cannons, ready this time to properly finish the job. One of his subordinates nervously approaches closer and, addressing the commander, asks. He complains whether it is really proper to do this in a mock battle, especially to a former subordinate of a former admiral. Washa simply places his hand on his shoulder and you must. If you say no, next time your energy. Washa leans closer and pushes his subordinate a greater good speech, saying this is simply a necessary evil, otherwise the pirates will not stop, although the tone already sounds completely insane. The poor fellow can only stammer and squeeze out a frightened consent. Arguing with a mad birdman means burying his career with his own hands. After that boring, seemingly inspired speech by Wash, his flagship unleashes a full-scale magical hailstorm right into the Golden Lynx. Meanwhile, the rival captain and his crew do one thing: hold on and not drown in the wreckage of their own ship. He freezes in absolute horror, suddenly realizing what is happening to Genius's crew because of him. This Golden Lynx charges into the attack its deck, and sails are torn along by a series of explosions, wildly rolling one after another. From the water, her opponent grabs his communicator and shouts to Genius, just run away and save her. Jinya refuses, insists that not even the devil can move her. She will not leave him to die. She instantly understands this is no longer about him. Vasha tries to silence everyone who saw what he did. Raising her hat, Genius declares, helping people is the pride of her pirate crew and they will not retreat. Her opponent simply freezes in silence, completely stunned by her crazy suicidal courage. Her first assistant panics, warns that the ship will by no means withstand another such blow. Suddenly her communicator buzzes again. It's a call from Vasha himself. From the other end, the commander curls his lips condescendingly asks if she likes her tiny pirate game. Genius just listens, and her face hardens as soon as he begins his villain's monologue. He must think she is about to burst into running, and he is grateful that she herself turns into an easy target. Her eyes open wide with rage. She has finally grasped the true depth of his cruelty. Washa boasts that those stinging marks he leaves behind make cleaning up his mess much easier, and this, it turns out, is addressed to her rival. When their ship explodes again, he asks what it feels like to know that her heroic deeds simply cover everyone with death. With a truly terrible smile, he promises, her dirty pride will scatter them all across the sea like trash. Genius is completely confused, stumbles over words, and insists that his entire monologue is a complete lie and that he himself was mistaken in it. Her first mate timely picks up the conversation and reminds, throwing trash into the sea is wrong, and adds that this is a perfect repeated joke. But Genius clenches her fist over the magical seal, and her determination instantly hardens. She turns to her team along with the winged ally and announces that she has a plan. In response, the first mate raises a magical artifact and asks everyone to lend him their power. Turning to the present, golden chains are covered by a continuous shroud. Thick smoke billows from the deck. Washa laughs and fires at them from his flagship, mocking, as if all they can do is drown. He orders the crew to open fire again, decided once and for all to erase them from the face of the ocean. Another salvo splashes into the water right next to the already crippled ship Genius. The hull is torn apart by the explosion. Splinters fly in all directions as the vessel begins to break apart, but suddenly from the sky directly onto the ship Wash falls a huge checkered object as if it was struck from above. Now it is their winged crew member, a living air kite hovering over the battlefield. Washa and his subordinate can only freeze, looking up in complete shock. What kind of hell is this, damn it? In the water, her rival and the team of her opponent now shout hurrah to her from rescue boats. This only fuels Vasia's fury. He shouts to his team to sink this miserable raft. Because Jinna with her first mate now fly through the waves on a small wooden platform. She shouts orders, demanding her winged crew member sharply execute a 70-degree turn. This winged creature tears a trajectory through the air, stretches the rope to the limit, and whips the raft in a circle with incredible speed. They have effectively turned their crew member into a living engine for a high-speed raft under water skis. And now they are simply circling around the warship Vasha, dancing around the giant vessel, an absolutely crazy countermaneuver. Vasker loses his temper, trying to understand what kind of crazy plan could be hiding in Genius's head. Genius just looks ahead, focused, all sweaty. This is a 1 in a million chance, and she knows it. In the blink of an eye, she shows the team her grand strategy. With a smile, she sharply pulls the tarpaulin. Under it, a huge, broken magical cannon, and she declares that now they will fight back with it. Their winged ally and another crew member are quite naturally stunned by this overly broken plan. Genius explains if they manage to fire from here, they will disable the entire Wash fleet. And the tiny turtle crewmate highlights the obvious. The cannon is broken and they have no spare parts. With a confident smile, Genius says, oh yes, absolutely, because of course she has a plan. She reveals that her opponent's cannon was made from perfect materials specifically to repair their own. And thanks to a small seizure of Waisha, all these parts now float in the sea as conveniently as possible. This winged crew member is tasked with ascending into the sky and extracting all necessary components from the debris. Another partner activates her powers. She guides the trajectory of the flyer and dodges any attacks that will fly back. The small homunculus ally, resembling a golem, is ordered to prepare the cannon carriage with all the magic he can gather. And as soon as the parts come closer, the first assistant will use his own skill, pulling them towards himself. He activates his magical bracelet and literally remelts the cannon barrel, pulling it straight from the ocean. The preserved part flies to them and magically locks back onto their cannon base. Returning to the present time, their winged ally pulls the raft now standing on. It is a fully repaired super machine gun. This completely nonsensical scene is shown from above. The girl works as an engine for the platform with the floating cannon. Washa looks through his spy viewing device and finally understands. It is their parts that are suitable for assembling the weapon. He slams the spyglass shut in fury, completely humiliated by their counterattack by how they snooped in their filth. Washa, finally unable to endure, orders the team to pour all the magic into the main cannon. He understood everything. They are gathering details, and one key thing is already exactly in his line of fire. With a crazy, inhuman smile, he decides, as soon as they rush at the bait, he will simply vaporize them. One of his men shows that the escort ship is in the way, but Vasha cuts off. This is a convenient blind spot. With this order, a gigantic magical flash bursts from the cannon of his flagship. A colossal beam of pure energy cuts through the ocean, heading straight towards the ruins. It flies directly towards their winged crew member, who still holds the role of a living kite engine. Genius screams in horror that he is shooting at his own just to reach them. But her winged ally only grits his teeth and stretches his hand forward, determination on his face. She activates some magical ring, aiming directly at the part of the cannon that Vasha used as bait. A jagged piece emerges from the water, its magical power pulls straight there, into the very element. The wash explosion ricochets and hits the ocean a moment later than needed, missing both her and that area. The impact tears out a huge column of water, and suddenly it becomes clear how close it was. From the debris, the opponent's team can only stare frozen, struck silent by this nearly fatal mistake. But Washa just laughs wildly. Clearly, she fully enjoys all this absolute chaos. He spreads his arms wide, smugly savoring the moment as if it were a good throw, but still, trash remains trash. Only then does he break into a downpour, and through the rain emerges a familiar silhouette. The super cannon is already fully assembled. Genius and an ally resembling a mermaid stand ready to fire. Ginny's gaze again fixes on Washa's ship. Her expression clearly reads, "Time for reckoning." Her winged crew members have the same look, all gathered precisely for this final shot. Her ally, resembling a mermaid, casts one last, decisive glance, now or never. Washa, in contrast, reacts to this turn of events a bit less composed. With fierce fury, the genius shouts the one and only command that matters: fire. Their famous Junkup cannon charges and releases a huge sphere of pure magical energy. Then a massive beam bursts forth, roaring, flying over the water straight at Washa's flagship. After the shot, the recoil almost overturned their tiny raft. This thing really has a fierce kick. It crashes right into the hull of the warship, tearing the sails and splitting the main mast. At that very moment, a giant explosion covers the center of the ship with a fireball and scorches it with lightning. Then the explosion tears the vessel into pieces, scattering splinters and debris in all directions. Several explosions flare up one after another across the entire deck and, for some unexplained reason, break the hull itself so that the battleship is destroyed from the inside out. One of Waish's men shouts the obvious and reports to the commander, "The ship is done for." Washer can only watch. His hand trembles as his valuable custom-built flagship flies to smithereens in small fragments. He was going to use pirate treasure to upgrade this and thus rule the Navy unchallenged, and the whole plan rested on this. And now he is overwhelmed by a complete hysteria. He shouts that he was defeated by a miserable raft rocket. In a fit of pure cowardice, Washer tries to flee the ship, abandoning his own men to their fate. The entire crew is herded into lifeboats and they sit, resignedly watching as the mighty ship sinks beneath the waves. The rival captain's crew simply goes mad. They scream so loudly that their hearts seem to burst out, and in doing so, they catch the genius. Even her rival is silent, as if nailed down, and quietly whispers her name in the same ecstatic silence that reigns after something just done. Jinia and her first assistant share an honestly earned fist bump for pulling off the impossible. The whole team joins in and celebrates the victory with teamwork, courage, and a whole bunch of trash. After the battle, the first assistant grumbles. They need a bigger water distiller. The team is growing after all. Genius, however, casually picks up the idea that her dad has a magical auto-diluter, so they can just use it. Her first assistant freezes. It turns out she can control magical technologies, but for her, it's just an ordinary household appliance. While the rest of the crew wildly celebrates, Genius stands aside looking confused about their terrible poverty. In a sudden flash of memories, the woman with cat ears stretches and notices that the winged ally does not trust her. Then this winged ally sneaks up too close and asks if he even hears her, the cat girl. He wakes from sleep and the turtle on his shoulder immediately reminds him, Jinna is a cat person. This triggers a memory of someone who went too far, sniffing the cat to the horror of the winged ally. Then we see the past of the senior mate. Using his recycling powers, he rebuilds a town destroyed by flamethrowers. He single-handedly repaired entire buildings and gathered the whole neighborhood together. His turtle companion worries, saying he is overdoing it and exhausting himself just to help everyone. But he just brushes it off, insisting that he is fine, although he looks like he is about to collapse. Meanwhile, some long-nosed official causes a complete collapse over an application from Genias. He reached extreme anger. The pirate's daughter dared to apply to their prestigious naval academy. However, her father calmly explains, her education will make her a huge asset to the country. The younger genius nods excitedly. He is totally for joining the navy to become stronger. Returning to the present, he sees people he once saved now offer to help him build a ship. One of them goes too far and asks if he will take responsibility for Genius. He boldly declares that he met her passion with his own, and the crowd is completely stunned. The whole crowd instantly interprets it as a passionate romance, and it is truly an astonishing misunderstanding. We flash back. The mother of the first assistant screams his name in frenzied despair, and fear tear her throat. And our guy lies in the rubble and, looking at her from below upwards, is completely stunned and confused. She suddenly rushed to him, pressed him to her chest, and barked, "What the hell just happened?" And in bed, he just keeps looking at his magic bracelet, trying somehow to piece together the disaster. He says it was just a curious boy, testing his new powers together with a friend. So he tried his transformation magic on a garbage cart for the first time, and everything instantly slipped out of control. In other words, he created a huge installation from junk, and now it blocks the city gates. From above, it is clearly visible. His little experiment completely blocked the main road. All the townspeople, including his mother, froze in complete shocked silence. But this shock immediately turned into fear when they whispered about his dangerous ability. But this boy cannot understand. Why is everyone suddenly so afraid of him? The crowd tightens around them and demands to answer what he did to their city. And with a hoarse breath, he jerks awake in bed. It was just a nightmare. But someone is there, and it is their winged crew member, who watches over him while he sleeps. He clenches his head. Painful memories of that moment still seem too real. This dream burst out of memory as sharply as all those who rejected it whispered, "This is not talent, a curse." And just as he looked up, a winged ally hovered above him, attentive, caring, as if nothing bad had happened. She gave him a bright smile and joyfully exclaimed a greeting, "Good morning." Our guy is confused. He cannot believe what is she doing in his room. His turtle assistant explains, she simply went crazy with anxiety because he still hadn't woken up. Our guy is completely broken after the fight, lying unconscious, without awareness on the raft next to the sleeping crew member. His hand twitches as he slowly begins to regain consciousness. Memories one by one embrace him back. In bed, he thanks the winged ally for taking care of him while he was not around. And she simply softens when he strokes her head with soothing movements so cute that it warms the soul. The turtle companion clears her throat, ready to drop very important news on them. Since the shadow official announces their imitation duel was successful and immediately issues them a privateer license. The first assistant beams with relief, celebrating that Genius has finally become a real licensed captain. He imagines her in full pirate glory, ready to become a legend just like her father. But the turtle sadly twitches reality. Just as she fulfilled her dream, his own role is already over. This thought hits our guy like a brick, and he simply freezes emotionlessly, staring with an empty gaze. So the winged ally will have to explain everything to him aloud, which means he can no longer stay near Genius. He looks completely stunned, asks if they really have to part ways right here. Trying to be noble, he brushes off the panic, saying nothing can be done. Genius finally got what she wanted. But as soon as he looks away, the real problem emerges. He is an exiled criminal, and his presence will ruin everything for her. One thing is just to be on her crew, but this could cost her own privateer license, one with such effort, completely depriving her of all rights, and such a decision would already have been made by the Navy. The mood in the room quickly drops, and the turtle even hides under the blanket. This is truly harsh. With new determination, he gets up from the bed and shows his packed bag. Grabbing his things, he had already definitely decided what he would do next. He declares he will build a completely new sea city to meet her again on equal terms. And the winged ally simply smiles, fully supporting his incredibly grand new plan. With a new goal in mind, our guy gets to work immediately and declares that he will rebuild everything from scratch. For now, Genius stands alone on a huge stone pier and looks at the water. She barely whispers her father's name and desperately holds back, as if overcoming something too heavy. Apparently, she is trying to convince herself this result is exactly what she truly wanted. Suddenly, the senior assistant notices her as she pulls a cart full of firewood. He asks what she is actually doing here, while the winged ally peeks out from behind his back. Genius completely freezes in amazement and addresses him with an extremely official title. He kneels down to her eye level and asks what she is thinking. Her hands are tightly clenched, and this reveals how nervous she really is. In a moment, she still finds the courage within herself and asks him something completely unthinkable, not at all from that side. She wants to find out if she can join him on the journey. This really frustrates both him and the winged ally. Our guy just remains completely stunned. He cannot comprehend what he just heard. A flock of birds flaps its wings and takes off into the sky, well, of course, because that's how it should be. Finally, he asked what she was talking about, reminding her that she just received a private pilot license, but gee. And Jinya only responds with a look unwaveringly determined, without any hesitation. She explains it was thanks to him that she managed to return her father's ship. And now, as the official heir of the Seacat family, Jinya strives to fulfill her father's dream. He asked what kind of dream it was, and she quietly confirmed, it is her new mission. Her father's great dream, which never came true, to appeal to the kingdom for a large-scale cleanup of garbage. She explains that her father, a sea cat, was essentially a pirate, and the state even supported him. He was given a lot of official assistance. His main goal is to gain the support of the entire nation to clean the ocean from pollution that poisons their home. Our guy listens silently and attentively, as if absorbing this huge revelation about her family's past. Jinya cuts off the phrase halfway, her eyes show. The plan has hit a big, completely predictable dead end. In the flashback, Jinya is seen as she really is. Right after graduation, she tries to push her grand idea before a picky maritime official. And that man, soaked with contempt, tells her directly, the idea is funny, but it's impossible. Genius is completely stunned. Her dream, on which she had pinned her whole life, suddenly breaks off and goes completely silent. Then this official reveals the dirty secret of the kingdom, turning away from her. It turns out their country has gained giant industrial power, but along with it, no less giant problem with waste disposal. So they simply throw all the garbage into the sea, and every year it gets worse. A whole council of corrupt old men thinks only about their own benefit. The environment means nothing to them. Anyone who tried to remove the whistle from this mess was simply and as inconspicuously as possible wiped off the radar. This official practically ordered her to give up and completely broke the spirit of the younger Jinya. Turning to the present, she admits with a wry smile, she always expected a refusal. This whole conspiracy is too much for our guy to digest all at once. She asks why refuse if the kingdom's help is her only chance, isn't it? She quietly admits, yes, it was true until she met him. Traveling together turned her very essence of the problem upside down, and it is this she now explains. She sees how he tackles the garbage problem directly and cannot understand why he was kicked out from here at all. And then she realized this world, clogged with garbage, needs not a government program but him. Our guy was completely confused and stubbornly insists that he is by no means special. And Jinya quietly disagrees, folding her hands behind her back. She explains his power of recycling gave her new life after she was treated like garbage. Now she wants to help him realize the dream herself. Her story nervously trembles as she asks if she will be okay with this because she wants to stay with him from now on, and arranges a full confession. The first assistant simply freezes, stands as if rooted to the spot, completely stunned by her request. Genius raises his gaze and will wait for an answer so determined that it is impossible to divert him. While he chooses his words, the winged ally on the side closely watches his every move. She is about to step, but a scream from the ocean sharply interrupts them. He turns around, a ship is sailing towards them, and it is full of familiar faces. These are the residents of the city he once saved. They wave to him from the deck and shout joyfully. Both he and Jinya freeze in amazement. The entire village stands at the threshold. It turns out they stole the royal warship and pulled from the ruins the remains of the father's old vessel. This crew on the pier announces that they already have enough materials to build homes for everyone. He simply freezes and looks at the huge pile of recycled parts, utterly overwhelmed. Our guy barely processes what he sees and asks if they really mean everyone. This leading townsman shows a thumbs up and declares that his passion inspired everyone to join him. The sudden arrival of an entire fan club leaves him speechless. And one of the girls confesses, she told everyone that he was coming, so they just decided to come as well. Still not having come to his senses, he asks Jinya if she is really so confident about all this. Because his thoughts snap back to the times when he was the prince wrapped in horror, rejected and hated by everyone. Frightened, he warns her, hold only onto him and they will all become wanted criminals, but the main townsman just pats him on the back and cuts him off, throw away all the nonsense. He just laughs in response and declares that they are already sea cats, and he doesn't care what they will be called later, pirates or someone else. Genius just looks at him, frozen by this sudden, wildly sincere demonstration of loyalty. She tells him, here everyone feels the same as she does. Another peasant picks up the words, no one will fix this dirty world, not the kingdom. He will fix it. This leader agrees and adds that his conviction gave them all a reason to hope again. And Jinya delivers the final blow. Here no one considers him some kind of curse. His eyes sharply widen. The shock of finally being accepted washes over him in a wave. A slow, relieved smile spreads across his face, as if the past is finally lifting off his shoulders. Genius thanks on behalf of everyone. Her hands are tightly clasped, and in every gesture sincere gratitude. Then she turns back to him again and smiles so widely, as if asking, so this is a yes. In response, he extends his hand. His magical bracelet flashes, coming to life with. Raising his hand, he solemnly greets the gathered team, everyone, without exception. And as soon as this is finished, the work begins. Someone steps on the board over the already worked, saved wood. Everyone jumps into work carrying supplies, while the winged ally flies overhead, keeping the pace. After a brief rest, the companion turtle walks heavily and immediately asks an extremely important question. It turns out this turtle makes it clear, since they are building a whole new nation, they probably need a name for it too. Our guy, tapping his head, pounds into the silence, trying to come up with a fitting name for the new nation. And then an epiphany, like a light bulb in a classic scene, something clicks in the head and suddenly everything is clear. He solemnly states, Super Hyper Fun Max Recycle Nation, a name so terrible that it can undoubtedly be placed alongside works of art. And this guy is already glowing with pure, unadulterated confidence, as if to say, the most terrible idea in the world suits him just right. Genius and his winged ally invent disgusting nicknames for themselves, and one of them includes Living Dead, and the soul of our guy simply leaves the body. This brain attack is a complete failure. He grabs his head and writhes in pain. Finally, the winged ally intervenes, suggesting they simply call him Noah in his honor, Nakwal. Both the genius and the turtle, it seems, both on this ship agree with this simpler, smarter idea. A wide smile spreads across his face. Noah easy to remember and sounds good, so. Raising his hands in triumph, he officially announces his decision. Standing before the newly built floating bridge, he prepares to deliver a solemn announcement, announcing that from now on their sea nation will be called Noah. Genius is simply delighted. Their little raft boat has turned into such a huge ark. He confirms that everything is almost finished. Then we move on to the memory. A little girl named Rose Arcane, she is 5, calls her prince. And here a much younger Nokal Zedra Arcane, she is 14 and she looks completely confused. It turns out little Rose has a habit of following him literally everywhere, even into the bathroom, without any boundaries. She just puffs out her cheeks and does not regret her clinginess at all. And he hears in response only how she flies into him with her whole body, shouting that he is so mean because he wants to stay alone for a moment. These two are a complete mess of flailing arms and screams rolling just beyond the castle walls. A few years later, 11-year-old Trianda suggests that His Majesty probably should go and study at the Imperial Academy. Memory, 20-year-old Nokal with a stone face works on a wind energy device. Suddenly it becomes clear he found himself in a huge junkyard, and Rose throws out that it's pointless for the cursed prince to even try. The voice of his brother Zeus echoes in his head, only professionals should rule, you don't have royal talent. Rose just casually cuts in, he has a completely rotten character without any embellishments. And then she starts a lecture, how dignity is inherited and that it's not something you can just take and earn. He squeezes his inventory even tighter. It is clear that he is already extremely tired of this conversation. Without turning his back on her, he gives the order, go. He warns if anyone sees him next to her, her reputation is finished, but Rose instantly and loudly refuses, declaring that she will do whatever she wants. This completely confuses him. She winks and announces her new personal mission, to knock some dignity and knowledge out of him so that he eventually becomes a real prince. Returning to the present, the massive, fully constructed Noah's Ark stands majestically at the pier. Noko intently stares at the sheet, and Jinya in full pirate gear closely watches him. The whole gang has gathered together and is asking him what he is so deeply thinking about. But it turns out that he is overwhelmed by a real crowd. Peasants are crowding around and shouting demands to introduce the laws of the new nation. Holding a thick stack of requests, he complains to Jinya that this is many times more work than the imperial studies he missed. He decides to start with something easy. He examines a request submitted by a mother and her little son. This little boy in his drawing calls a demon cannon into the room to beat the villains. The idea is confident and well thought out. Nokal just looks at the paper with a completely blank expression, and Jinya watches him. Then she points to the balance of power with the scale of Noah, implying it's only a matter of time before the kingdom notices them. He is immediately overwhelmed by the thought of another military conflict. He grabs his head and concludes a defense plan is needed right now. The winged ally steps forward and hints that his forces might be the key to handling any external threats. The winged ally declares she is ready to test her newly revived power. A radiant sigil flutters above her head. She calls it a stealth barrier, and as soon as she activates it, the entire arc begins to become invisible. But the effect lasts only about 5 seconds until she is completely overwhelmed, and Jinya boldly declares that it is absolutely useless. Noko looks unshaken while the winged ally explains that she needs more faith to shield the entire island from enemies. Suddenly, one of the villagers interrupts. The rest of the team immediately bombards her with a bunch of questions. And by a few here they mean not just a handful of people, but a real crowd demanding explanations about taxes, trade routes, and who is in the kitchen today. This sudden burst of bureaucracy instantly breaks Nakwal. He collapses right on the spot, leaving a human-shaped indentation in the wall. Genius and his winged ally freeze, staring at the fallen body, while Nakwal mutters that he did not sign up for this. Lying on the deck, he feels the growing horror and suddenly clearly understands. He really should have studied, as Rose said. As soon as he hears the name, the winged ally immediately asks the main question, who is Rose? From the floor, Nakwal mumbles. Supposedly, she is the same girl he once saved during that garbage landslide. Then it turns out Rose Arkin is his cousin. She was a prodigy and at 11 years old became the assistant to the Prime Minister. And her character was so infectious the public adored her, even giving her the nickname Golden Rose. Meanwhile, the little companion puts 2 and 2 together and concludes, Rose is most likely the real reason why our guy was expelled. Nakwal immediately snaps at this thought, and the companion dryly points out the obvious. People loved her much more than him. He denies it so deeply that he even starts insisting. He doesn't even have a cousin, a fantastic way to get out of it. Thoughts again and again fly back to that accident. He wonders if Rose is okay now after all this time. But suddenly a girl appears before them in a too familiar, high-ranking naval uniform. She asks Nakwal if he really doesn't recognize her, and he just looks, completely stunned. While this is happening, somewhere in the tavern, pirates whisper and gossip what happened after Nakwal's expulsion, and the genius sits at the bar counter eavesdropping on every word. Returning to the capital, the court official looks completely stunned as he reports the bad news about Rose. The scene instantly shifts to Arcane Castle. A large-scale political crisis is already brewing there. Someone strikes down with all their might, and a stack of documents flies apart in a furious rage. This is a minister named Shord. He completely loses his temper and demands an explanation of what exactly is happening. Shord rages and argues with a masked naval officer. The rage is so fierce because some nobody, whom she recommended, is now ruining his reputation. This guy has a complete breakdown. He grabs his face and whines that all of this is unbearable for him. A calm voice suddenly cuts into his outburst, asking what exactly he is shouting about. And it was Noel's brother, the second Prince Euster, who looked completely indifferent to this spectacle. Shord immediately straightens up, sweating profusely. Now a person from the royal family has come here to witness his tiny performance. He bows low, trying to pretend that he is upset over some trivial matter. Zeustra immediately gets to the point and asks if it is true that Rose has disappeared. Shord quickly responds, calms him down, and insists that he has already taken control of the situation. His brilliant plan is simple: to reach out to Lord Last Vega Island, a dark masked figure named Goldor. Zeustra's eyes narrow. He is sure that this is exactly the one needed, the notorious slave trader and manhunter. And the whole logic is that Goldor's wealth and connections will make the search for Rose easy. With a simple hint at the hilt, Zeustra turns and walks away, leaving Evan to act at his own discretion. At that very moment, the prince was already gone, and a terribly creepy smile crawled across Shord's face. He doesn't even try to find Rose himself. Instead, he relies on the human trafficker who is supposed to pinpoint the location exactly. But deep down, he secretly hopes that she will be bought and sold, and then everything will be the most convenient option for him. The memory reveals his true nature. From the very beginning, he hated her because she defended the prince from the scum, Nakwal. In the memory, the minister barber hisses at the frightened Rose. He saved her only because her crying annoyed him so much. She objects no sane person would ever agree to go rescue an official exile. With a disgusting smile, Sheard hints, maybe some criminal from the black market Golder picked up the prince. In fact, he immediately sent her to this guy's ship, knowing that a monster like Golder sees people only as merchandise. But his secret hope is simple and sticky. Rose will be chained and sold, and that will be too convenient for him. Turning to the present, the naval officer nearly breaks down in hysteria. She clearly understands that Rose has disappeared and disappeared specifically on Last Vega Island. Genius confirms, yes, this is the very story she listened to in that tavern until the end. Her hand involuntarily clenches into a fist. Rage and firm determination gather her thoughts together, leaving only one direction. A flash of memories covers her. Before her eyes appears the younger Rose, smiling and alive, the very one because of whom we are fighting now. Suddenly, Nakal calls the whole team together and sharply lines everyone up a face like a person who is not joking. He admits, while they still have to establish laws for Noah, he is already preparing to ask for something remarkably selfish. Pointing at himself, he declares that he will immediately arrange for Vega to stay the longest in order to save Rose. And his team, like a conspiracy, only crack smiles and fully embrace the rescue mission. Genius gets fired up, declaring that sea cats never and under no circumstances ignore human traitors. Even the winged ally in battle excitement gives her full support for the mission. Nakal, stunned by their dedication, quietly thanks each one for always being there. The decision is made, the game's shield bar clicks loudly into place, and they set off immediately. Their gigantic arc, NOAA, sets course for the same bad Last Vega Island. On the deck, Nakal freezes, looking at the waves with a grim, collected determination fixed on his face. And the final flashback shows how young Rose fiercely defends him. She tells everyone how he always protected her from haters. With an unwavering vow, Noko declares that his time to save Rose has come, so she can only wait for him. Their giant hull, like an arrow from NOAA, cuts through the waves, and now they are fully immersed in this rescue mission, too risky to abandon. Jinya reports that they have finally reached Last Vega, and Noko is burning with eagerness. He wants to get ashore as soon as possible. But one of his crew members immediately puts everything on pause and warns, it won't be that easy. It turns out Last Vega is an exclusive resort for scoundrels. Only those approved by the trafficker Golder can land there. Moreover, the port is swarming with armed merchant ships, so a frontal attack is simply impossible. Nokul is already on edge, desperately searching for a way to sneak onto the heavily guarded island. Only for a moment does anxiety freeze on Jinya's face. Finally, she comprehends the incredible complexity of their situation. But suddenly she springs up and declares that there really is a plan, which greatly surprises Noko. She mysteriously orders him to follow her, leads him away, and reveals the brilliant move of her master. And their brilliant infiltration strategy rests on a single barrel floating in the ocean. Nokul, who is now inside, seems to be questioning every step of his life that led him to this very moment. He is simply sweating profusely, radiating pure, unspoiled, how humiliating energy. Genius proudly lays out the plan to his winged ally, under which he is disguised as genuine trash. This barrel will float past the guards along with the rest of the trash and give him a direct path to the island. As soon as he steps ashore, he will immediately blend in with the island workers who tirelessly move barrels that look identical, as if copied. Next, he only needs to load himself onto a cart and stealthily push straight into Golder's casino. He will have to honestly admit the plan is not bad, but there is one crucial question he must clarify. Our guy immediately demands an answer. Why exactly must he be alone stuck inside a barrel? She came up with a brilliant excuse. Supposedly she has seasickness, otherwise she would definitely have failed. And she confirmed it instantly. The body released air, disintegrated, and disappeared into a pile of clothes. A flawless excuse. The winged ally immediately declares she is going to nap, officially withdrawing from the stealth reconnaissance mission. Another crew member politely clarifies that the barrel essentially holds only one person, and this breaks Nakal. But Nakal tries to cheer himself up. He insists that being human cargo is better than doing nothing. He finally confirms with a resolute raised fist gesture, shouting that he fully supports this incredibly worthy plan. They just pull him off the deck and throw the prince into the barrel, which rolls and rolls until he screams, flying toward the ocean. It crashes into the water with a bang, a huge splash, and officially the most humiliating invasion in history begins. She still manages to wave a small goodbye, while the NOAA crew from the deck just sends her off with warm wishes. Genius looks worried, but the winged ally waves off too confidently, saying everything will be fine. And now he just hangs in the depths, perfectly camouflaged among other ocean debris. Inside the barrel, he is drawn again to the rose, and determination grows with every passing second, without any hesitation. He simply cannot comprehend how such a strong person could end up captive to some scoundrel like Goldor. Suddenly, noise rises from above, his face fills with grim concentration, and he is already ready for a confrontation. As soon as he pulls off the lid, he illuminates the island with a small spy telescope. Rushing through it, he immediately notices the target, a huge casino, and it is clear that this is the heart of Las Vegas. On the streets of the wealthy patron, he is solemnly welcomed. He boasts that with the money here, you can buy anything. Welcome to Las Vegas, a sprawling island resort built entirely on vice and human trafficking.